I wanted to share something that happened to me a couple of years ago. It's 100% true and it still haunts me to this day. I'd be really happy if you shared it, but please keep my name private. Thanks for taking the time to narrate it. The story happened to me a couple of years ago in Canada, in a pretty major city. I'm keeping the location and names anonymous for my own privacy and safety, but I can tell you this much. The area where this took place has had some problems before. Violence, complex beefs. It wasn't a place where you just chilled around at night, and this night made that fact all too real. It was around 2 a.m. when my ex-boyfriend and I took an Uber from my grandma's house to his place. The plan was for me to stay over, but when we got to his front door, he realized that he'd left his house keys back at my grandma's. Neither of us really felt like calling another Uber right away. It was late and we were both kind of on edge. Not with each other, just in that weird, restless kind of way you get when you're overtired but not quite ready to go home. There was a small park just a 2-minute walk from his house, so I suggested that we just sit there for a bit before heading back. He agreed. We walked over and sat on the teeter-totters. This park was totally empty, dimly lit by one flickering streetlight, and the air had that heavy stillness that just makes everything feel a little wrong. Now, to give you a better picture of the layout, because it actually matters for what happens next, the park was located on a street that splits off from a main road. His neighborhood kind of forms a complex with 2 small dead-end streets, one on the left where the park sits, and one on the right with more houses, both dead ends, one way in, one way out. We were only there for maybe 5 minutes when I had noticed a black car pull into the complex from the main road. It had fully tinted windows. I remember that detail so clearly. I couldn't see a single thing inside of it. The car slowly drove toward our side of the park down to the dead end, did a U-turn, and then drove to the other side of the complex. Another U-turn. Then it came back. By this point, my stomach was doing backflips. The way the car kept circling like a shark was giving me the worst feeling I'd had in a long time. My ex felt it too. He leaned over and whispered, "Get up, start walking." No hesitation. I got up and we started fast walking toward the roundabout on the opposite end of the park. The car suddenly stopped. The windows rolled down. Inside, I could see maybe 2 or 3 men. They yelled out to us, "Yo, yo, yo! Where you guys from?" Now, if you know anything about certain areas in Canada, especially places with complex beefs between neighborhoods, then you know that question isn't innocent. It was aggressive, it was bait, and it meant trouble. We didn't answer, we didn't look back. We kept walking, and then we heard the doors open. They were getting out. That's when we started running. The adrenaline hit so hard I barely felt my legs. My ex was yelling at me to just keep going. I remember the crunch of gravel behind us, fast footsteps. Then I saw something that still gives me chills. A small red laser skimming across the ground near my feet. I don't know if it was attached to a gun, but that's what it looked like. And if it was, they weren't just trying to scare us. They were trying to hunt us. We bolted out of the park, ran across the main road, and darted into someone's backyard. At that point, I could barely breathe. I thought any second I'd feel a bullet in my back. We called 911 from that backyard. I don't even remember what I said. I was shaking so bad that I dropped the phone twice. The cops showed up eventually, but by then the car was long gone. To this day, I don't know who those guys were or what they wanted, but I do know one thing. If we stayed in that park even 1 minute longer, I might not be alive to tell this story. Let this be a warning. Trust your gut. If something feels off, it is off. And never ever get comfortable at 2 a.m. in a neighborhood that you don't fully know, because someone might be watching, waiting. Warning. The following story briefly mentions sexual abuse with a minor. Please skip this story if you do not want to hear that type of content. I'm currently a 22-year-old female living in Toronto, Canada, but this happened to me when I was 12 years old living in a small town 2 hours away. I've always been a quiet and reserved child, so much so that I didn't have many friends, and those that I did call my friends had many other people, and of them I was more of a third choice. It was summer, and school was let out just the day prior. I had made plans with one of my friends to meet at the park. We'll call her Maya. She was a popular girl, and she was 2 years younger than me. So oftentimes we would make plans to go to the park or the lake. This was like no other day, but unfortunately, it was one of those days. Even though we had plans, she had canceled at the last minute to go do whatever. Since I lived about a 45-minute walk from the park, I just decided to play around. After a little while, I had heard a sound, and it was an ice cream truck. So I ran over and went to go buy a milkshake. I believe a vanilla milkshake. As I went to hand him the money, he told me that I didn't need to. He then asked why I was by myself. I told him and he felt bad, so he offered to let me come inside to look in the truck. I thought that I was the luckiest kid in the world. He let me play the sounds, sit in the driver's seat, and just have the best day of any kid's life. Then I went back to the park, and of course the story doesn't end there. We became friends, and after like 2 weeks he gained my entire trust. But then one day, he started to get handsy. He put his hand on my thighs and he gave me tight hugs, but I didn't think too much of it. Even though my gut was screaming at me, I ignored it. But one day, he got more touchy, much more touchy. He started asking me really weird questions, asking what color underwear I wear, if I started wearing a bra, and if I wanted to see his private parts. This was strange to me, but he would always follow them up by saying, "Don't worry, we're friends, and friends talk about this kind of stuff." And I believed it. Then one day, he got more than a little touchy. He started to convince me to undress and that we played around. We did a lot of things that I'm really ashamed of in the last 2 months of the summer. But the very last day we were together, I had started to grow distant and I wanted us to not continue these things. But that didn't work out. He got angry and he forced himself so hard on me. I was screaming and I begged him to stop. He didn't, and there was a moment where he stopped and he had his back turned to me. My fear, anger, and disgust fully took over, and I didn't think. I saw a knife on the counter and held it. Soon after he turned around, he had laughed at me and walked towards me. I didn't think. I just drove the knife right into his manhood. He then fell to his knees crying and pleading with me, wondering why I did this. I ran out of the truck, and I just kept running until I ran into the forest that was next to a field. And once I couldn't run anymore, I collapsed and I passed out by a tree. I woke up several hours later. I never told my friends or family. I didn't get the cops involved or anything. I blame myself for that. Who knows if he did that to anyone else? He could have been in jail now or dead. Not a day goes by where I don't have regrets. If I see or hear an ice cream truck, I get flashbacks. I'm dizzy and scared. I have a current diagnosis of PTSD due to this and many other horrible things too. Thank you all for listening, and thank you to Southern Cannibal. I've been wanting to post this for a few years now. I'm getting help, and I told some of my close friends about this, and I've spoken to a psychiatrist about it too. This might not fit in with the usual stories that you all hear on the channel, since there's really no physical proof that I have, but for me, it's still fresh in my mind just like it was yesterday. The story takes place on a Saturday during late spring in 1999 when I was 12 years old. I lived in a city called Brandon, Manitoba, Canada on a busy main road. I used to babysit my niece and nephew whenever my sister needed to just get out of the house. And since she lived 3 blocks away along the same busy street, it didn't take me long to get there. Before I should continue, I should explain a couple of things that will be relevant for later on in the story. I had a beautiful new mountain bike that I loved riding, and on this day, I was wearing one of my favorite outfits, which was a neon green tank top and matching shorts. So now that that's been said, I'll get back to the story. That morning, my sister needed to go grocery shopping and asked if I could babysit. Having nothing better to do, I hopped on my bike and got there shortly after. After a few hours of babysitting, my sister showed up, and after a quick chat, I hopped on my bike at 2:05 p.m. Now, here's where it gets scary. I woke up in the middle of that very busy road on the center line with my bike on top of me. I pushed it off and got up before walking my bike and me to the sidewalk. As I quickly assessed myself, I had what I could only describe as road rash all over my body, but the weird thing was that it didn't hurt at all. The scrapes and scratches were everywhere and felt rough, but yet I couldn't feel any pain or soreness. I looked at my bike and it was still perfect. Nothing was wrong with it, and my neon green clothes were not dirty or ripped or really anything. I was perfectly fine, but I wasn't perfectly fine. I got back onto my bike and rode the last block back to my house. When I got in the front yard, my family freaked out. My sister and mother were all home waiting for my brothers and dad to get home from doing another few laps searching for me. Turns out it was 7 p.m. and they had searched up and down that very street, as well as the rest of the city looking for me for hours. My mom went to treat my road rash, but was shocked when I didn't wince or anything from the rubbing alcohol. I explained what I knew and where I woke up. My dad and brothers also eventually showed up, and I explained it all again. None of them had seen me. None of this made sense to anyone. They took me to the hospital, and after hours of being thoroughly examined and blood work taken to rule out drugs while I explained to the hospital staff and police officers, I was able to go home. Apart from the road rash, I wasn't really assaulted in any other way, and no one could explain why my clothes were perfectly clean with the amount of scratches that were on my body. Neighbors who lived down the street where I woke up were coming home around that time, but none of them remember seeing me. Police officers on patrol who had driven down that road frequently also didn't see me. We were told later on that there were no drugs in my system at all. So what happened during those 5 hours? No one can explain it, not even me. Since that day, I've never been on a bicycle, and I have really bad anxiety when thinking about that city. I moved from there a year later and will never go back. Over the years, I've tried many different types of therapy to try to recover those memories of those 5 hours, but there's nothing to recover, I guess. So who really knows what happened? I know it sounds crazy, but the only thing that I can really think of is aliens or something supernatural. Again, I know that sounds crazy, but at this point, I really don't know what to think. For some background, I'm a female and I live in Canada, and this occurred during my first term in my first year at university. I was fresh out of high school and just barely 18 at the time, but I've always been told that I look young for my age. At the time this took place, I lived with my parents and commuted to campus via the bus. I had a 4-hour gap between my first and second class of the day, so I would take the 20-minute bus ride home to relax and eat lunch, and then head back for my later class. From the beginning of the term, I noticed a guy who would always take the same bus as me at the same times and get on and off at the same stop. I would often notice him staring or would catch his glance, but just assumed it was a coincidence. One day, about a month into the term, I was waiting for my bus at the bus stop near my house to go to my second class for the day, when I noticed the guy come up from behind me. He was asking if I was going to my Indigenous Studies class, as he was also in the same class. I said yes, thinking that I might make a new friend or at least an acquaintance in the same class as me. We chatted for a while with some small talk, and when the bus arrived, he sat right beside me and continued to chat about my degree and his degree. Through this, I found out that he was 5 years older than me. I found it a bit strange that he would come up and talk to me given the age gap and that I look young for my age, but just hoped that he was just friendly and I could gain some advice about the university from him. When the bus arrived on campus, we both got out and headed to class. This pattern continued for a few days. Every time I took the bus, he was also there sitting right beside me. Sometimes he would chat a lot and show me funny videos on Instagram, and sometimes he would be completely silent and answer questions with one-word answers. About a week or two later, he asked for my snap to keep in touch about an upcoming assignment in the class we had together. I didn't really want to give it to him, but figured there wasn't much harm because it was just Snapchat. The first snap I got from him was a selfie asking what I was up to. I was at home watching a show, and so I sent him a snap of that, and he told me he was at the bar and asked if I wanted to come pick him up. I politely declined as at that time I had shared a car with my brother, and I didn't feel like picking up this guy at 1 a.m, but he didn't take the rejection very well, and he got angry with me. I avoided snapping him for a while after this, as I didn't like how he was behaving and wanted to just try and stay safe. But the next day he snapped at me, and he told me we should watch the show together. He even went as far as inviting me over to watch the show with him. I declined his offer as I wasn't really interested in spending time with him at all, let alone in such a vulnerable environment. The following weeks, he continued to take the bus at the same time as me and started to touch my arms and legs whenever we sat next to each other. I was very uncomfortable with this, but I didn't want to say anything as he really frightened me, and I wasn't sure what he would do if I told him to stop. I tried to avoid him by sitting away from him, but he would always move to sit beside me. He also started following me home and would ask to come inside. I used the excuse that it was my parents' house, so I wasn't allowed to have anyone over. This seemed to deter him from coming inside. Then he started snapping me and asking me if I would come over and hook up with him. I declined this as I personally do not even do hookups. This didn't stop him, as he continued to snap me and asked for nudes and tell me I was cute and tiny. This really grossed me out, as I was freshly 18 and he was 23. I know that's not a huge age gap, but there's definitely a difference in maturity. After this, I told him to stop contacting me altogether, and he called me a hoe. I then blocked him on Snap. The term was almost over by this point, but I unfortunately continued to see him a few more times on the bus. I really tried my best to avoid him, but when we were on the same bus, he would continue to put his arm around me or touch my thighs. When the second term of the year started, we had different schedules, so we took the bus at different times. I avoided him as much as possible, and successfully did so for that term. Then, the following year and the start of my second year at university, I thought that he was finally done with his degree and I would catch a break. Unfortunately, after the first day back, I had received a message on Canvas, which is the platform my university uses for professors to post information and assignments for classes. This guy found me on Canvas through the old class that we had together a year prior to send me a message to tell me that he saw me and to add him on Snap since he can't find my Snap. I ignored these messages, but then later on I received a follow request from him on Instagram. I also blocked him on Instagram and hoped to not see him. Unfortunately, I found him following me around on campus a few times, and he was also on the bus. By this point though, I had a boyfriend who would drive me to campus most of the time. I would take the bus home sometimes though, because our schedules didn't line up. Every time I saw the creep on the bus, he would always stare at me and then move beside me. I decided to stop taking the bus, and luckily my boyfriend was able to drive me to and from university every day. I got many requests from different Snapchat accounts that I believe belonged to him, but I just didn't accept them. It's now the second term and I'm back to taking the bus as my boyfriend is working a job this term. I haven't seen the creep yet, but that doesn't mean he hasn't seen me. Hopefully he's finally finished with his degree and he'll leave me alone permanently. Stay safe out there, guys, and don't trust anyone. So this actually happened to me today, and it felt like something I should share here as a caution to others. I live in a small city not too far from Edmonton, and recently there's been a series of armed robberies happening in and around the area. It's made me wary about walking alone at night, so I found myself home at night more often than usual. It's not the worst, but I really dislike having this feeling of unease, but I manage and make do. So today, my dad and his girlfriend were invited out to a party, meaning I had the whole house to myself. I pretty much had the evening all planned out. Watched some episodes from my favorite soap opera, then switched over to some classic horror films. So I said bye to them as they left, and then quickly loaded up the TV. It was not long after that I'd started up the horror movie that I had heard a knock at the door. It wasn't a regular knocking either. If my TV had been any louder, I probably wouldn't have been able to hear it. Thinking it was nothing at first, I went over to the door without pausing the movie just to confirm. But to my surprise, there was someone at the door. I opened the door and there stood a slim man. He looked to be in his mid-30s, and that's all I can pretty much say. I'm not the best when it comes to describing people, and I didn't really go out of my way to analyze him at the moment. I couldn't even tell you if his jacket was gray or black. The man said he represented a security company and was going around my area to offer his company services. He asked if the owner of the house was home, to which I told him no and that he would not be home until late. He then began giving me some quick information about his company, that it was the only one that was locally funded, that it's already being used in several homes on my street, and that it's smart device friendly. He even showed me a laminated piece of paper that displayed all the different devices that could work with the security system. I told him that we weren't interested in having a security system at this time. He proceeded to ask me if my family leaves the house for long trips, which would be a great reason to get the security system. Looking back on it now, this was a huge red flag, but I answered honestly that the house was almost never empty and that we never really went on trips. I also added that he could speak to my dad tomorrow if he was coming back. He told me that his team would be leaving for another city tomorrow. Then he thanked me for my time, then left. I went back to my movie and pretty much forgot all about that visitor. The movie finishes and I decide to check my Facebook to glance at the buy and sales. Near the top of my feed is a shared post that caught my eye almost immediately. What I read next made me completely freeze up. It was from a woman who had also talked to a representative from the exact same security company that I'd been advertised to. This guy knocked on her door softly too, which immediately caught my attention. She noted how the guy never gave his name or business card, something I didn't even realize happened to me until I thought back on it. Overall, she was very suspicious of the guy, so she asked him to wait outside as she got some pen and paper to write down his phone number. When she returned, he was gone. The next door neighbor told her that they saw a man running down the road and into an alley. But the biggest fact that this woman dropped? She contacted the security company, and it does actually exist, but they told her that they didn't send anyone out to the city to go door to door. This shared post is blowing up, and it seems that it occurred to a lot more people than just me. Some people even showed video from their security cameras of these employees. There's definitely more than one person pretending to work for this company, one even being a woman, and a lot of strange activity being reported. One person going into the backyard without permission, another person standing out in front of the house like they're scoping it out. Knowing all of this now, it makes the entire encounter with that guy at my door all the more terrifying. Was he scoping out my house too? Would he have tried something if I didn't answer? I also wonder, was he hesitant to try anything because I didn't pause my movie? For all he knew, I could have had a friend over. Luckily, nothing serious happened for the rest of the night, but I will be extremely cautious from now on. If there's one thing I would advise, be suspicious of anyone you don't know that comes to your house. Just because someone says they work for a company doesn't make it true. You don't know who they are or what they might actually want from you. This happened 3 years ago in the middle of July. I'm a female and I was 16 years old at the time. I live in Canada, Ontario, and everyone usually has this image that Canada is really safe. However, that perception will not stop any creepers. There's a lot of crazy stuff that happens here from time to time, more often now than before. To start off, I live in the suburbs. It is not the safest city, but it can be safe if it's daytime, along with it being in a well-crowded area. I was going on an evening walk, which I did quite often during the summer, usually before sunset, as I had to be home before that. The path I take my walk on is on the sidewalk of a main road, so there are a lot of cars passing by, and still quite a few cars pass by before sunset, as this is the time some people get home from work as well. I was walking, minding my own business and enjoying the cool evening air. A car honked. I didn't think much of it though, as I wasn't sure if it was at me, but there also wasn't much traffic either. On the sidewalk, there's an entrance to the plaza, so cars driving onto the main road can turn into this plaza. I looked both ways just to make sure a car wasn't going to pull in, and I crossed. Strangely, after I crossed, I noticed the same car from the corner of my eye. This is when I realized the honk was probably at me. After I crossed, I looked back. I don't know why I looked back, but I acted on my hunch to look. I now wonder if I could have avoided this if I just didn't look. At that moment, the man made eye contact with me as his window was down. He was turning into the plaza, although his car wasn't really in the plaza. He turned his car into the entrance of the plaza and just stopped it so it was completely blocking off the sidewalk. If any cars wanted to come in, they couldn't because he blocked it off with his car. And if anyone is walking on the sidewalk, they'd have to go around his car. I was really confused but alarmed. He opened his car door and started to approach me, and I began to back away so that he isn't too close to me. To describe the man, he wasn't that tall, but still taller than me. He wore these big black sunglasses, so unfortunately, I don't know what his entire face even looked like. He wore a Brazil t-shirt, FIFA World Cup at the time, and white pants. He began to converse with me, telling me that he thought I was some woman that worked at some shop that he goes to, and I told him no. I knew that this is a red flag and probably just some bullcrap as well. I had my guard up the entire time. I didn't want to talk to this man, but I didn't want to make it appear that I was frightened, so he didn't try and pull off some kind of stunt. He was still trying to create a conversation with me. He repeatedly kept telling me that I was beautiful to the point that would make anyone feel really uncomfortable, which really did make me feel uncomfortable, but I just played it off by saying thank you. He then asked me, "How old are you?" I then replied back telling him I'm a minor, thinking that maybe he'll just leave me alone. Clearly, I thought wrong. He then asked me to say where I'm from, to which I thought saying my ethnicity isn't something private, so I told him. I responded back saying, "I'm from Syria." I don't know why I asked the same thing back to him because I realized that I'm just feeding the conversation, but at the same time, I don't want to show my fear, so I was trying to appear calm. He then told me that the old president of his country was Syrian, which was probably just a lie and was just trying to find a way to relate to me. He then told me, "Arabic women are just very beautiful." At some point in the conversation, he kept calling me beautiful and pretty, which was still making me uncomfortable. He asked me if I was looking for any guys, if I was interested. I told him no. Then he asked me, "What boy's causing you trouble?" I replied saying that all that stuff is just a waste of time, thinking if I said that, maybe this time he will leave me alone, because at this point it just seems like he's trying to hook up with me. That or he had some other intention judging by the way he was acting and talking, which is not something someone usually initiates on the sidewalk of a main road. I really don't know why I tolerated this uncomfortable conversation at this point, because then he tells me, "You're so beautiful. I don't see why any boys wouldn't like you." On the inside, I'm just thinking, what the hell does someone say in response to that? I just awkwardly forced out a laugh. He then proceeded to say, "Seriously, how old are you?" I know that I shouldn't have said what I just said now, but I told him how old I was. I said I was 16. He just stood there saying, "Wow, I never would have thought you were 16. You seem way more mature. I thought you were at least 24. I took the opportunity to ask how old he was since he was so persistent in knowing my age. He's 32 years old. This man is twice my age. I asked for his name because in the back of my mind, I felt like if I had this info about him, it could maybe be useful. Again, this was probably not a good idea because I realized afterwards this is only feeding the conversation. He told me that his name is Jonathan. Then he asked me for my name, and I said that it's a secret. At the time, I was thinking that was slick of me, but I'm actually pretty thankful that he didn't get aggressive. He kept insisting that he'll move his car from the middle of the entrance so that we can talk, and I said no, I had to get going, so I said that I'm leaving, to which he then says, "Why?" What do you mean why? Then he started asking me for my number. I told him that I don't give my number to strangers. He was telling me that he really wanted to be in contact, and he started asking if I had Facebook or WhatsApp, to which I said no. He just kept insisting that we keep in contact after I repeatedly refused to give him any sort of my contact information. He then says, "Hey look, I'm gonna go move my car." I thought this was my chance to leave because he wanted to move his car so he could continue talking to me. So right at that moment, I then said, "I'm leaving, bye." At this point, I just had enough. I thought this was the end of it because I had heard him say bye after I turned around to leave. Only when I looked to my right, I noticed that he was following me in his car. He rolled down his window and began to smile and wave at me, which was really disturbing. This really freaked me out, so I started to walk faster. When I looked back, I didn't see his car, but I was able to connect the dots to realize that he went into the gas station that was behind me. Unfortunately, this still wasn't over. His car was parked in the gas station and he proceeded to walk on foot on the same sidewalk that I'm walking in, so I definitely believe he was following me. My fight or flight mode broke in and I began to run home, which was only minutes away. I even took off my sandals so that they wouldn't snap and hurt me while running, so I didn't have 32-year-old Jonathan on my trail. I even stopped for a moment to explain to these two ladies that there's a man following me, to which they looked at me like I was crazy and just ignored me. Fortunately, I made it back home safely, and when I looked back, I couldn't see Jonathan, so I assumed that he just turned back when he saw me running. I really consider myself lucky that he didn't start running after me. I truly believe that if all of this didn't occur on the sidewalk of a main road, but rather in a secluded area, he probably might have tried something. His presence made me feel uncomfortable. Needless to say, these evening walks also came to an end. Some of this information is a bit fuzzy, but this happened to my mom around 1989 when she was around 19 to 20 years old. My mom had moved to Manitoba, Canada to stay with her aunt and uncle while she worked. The company she worked at was on the top of 3 floors of an office tower on Portage Avenue. It was located on the same level as the cafe, so everyone came up to their floor and walked past its reception desk if they wanted something to eat. The receptionist would often ask my mom to cover for her while she went on her lunch break. While taking over one day, a handsome Middle Eastern man came up to her and struck up a conversation. He was around his 40s, dressed sharply, and said that he worked in a company a few floors down. He commented on how attractive she was and asked if she wanted to do any modeling for his company. He handed her his business card and left. She wasn't sketched out at all by the guy because he seemed so normal, but asked both her mom and aunt what she should do. They both told her to go for it, but to call the Better Business Bureau to see if the business was actually legitimate. According to the Better Business Bureau, it was real. The next day, while my mom was working the desk, he approached her again and asked if she had put any thought into the offer. He asked to meet for lunch the next day at the Fairmont Hotel so they could talk about the business. The hotel was in walking distance from the company, and you could see it through the window of their offices, so she felt safe enough to go by herself. She did tell her coworkers, and they agreed to call the police if she wasn't back in time. The next day, she arrives at the hotel early. She finally spots him at the check-in table. She goes up to him and realizes that he's checking into a room. She's getting a bit weirded out because all he said was that he wanted to have lunch in the restaurant there. He explains to her that he has a whole briefcase full of stuff that he wanted to present to her, and that it would be more private to show her in the hotel room. After a bit of arguing between my mom and him, he finally persuades her to go to the room. The check-in staff looked a bit skeptical while he handed him the key. They get in the elevator, and that is when she realized that he does not even have the briefcase, and that it wouldn't be in the room already because he had just checked in. Instead of getting the hell out of there like a normal person would, she follows him to the room. She takes the chair by the window while he lays down on the bed with his arms crossed behind his head. He can tell she's uncomfortable, so he asked her what her dream car was, and he tells her that she could afford it in a few months by modeling for him. He said that all she would have to do is wear different kinds of clothing and lingerie, and stand in separate partition rooms while buyers from all around the world would bid on the outfits, or bid on her. After his spiel on the company, He asks her to take off her clothes so that he can see her body because she needs to have a good figure to be able to model. Again, she's iffy, but he persuades her to get undressed in the bathroom and walk out in a towel so he can get a good look at her. While she's in the bathroom, she hears him talking in a different language and laughing on the phone. She walks out in her towel and he tells her to do a spin while he's on the phone, but she gets freaked out and runs back into the bathroom to get dressed again. She opens the door and then bolts out of the room. He stands up and watches her run down the hallway, but luckily doesn't follow her. She tells her coworkers all about it, but she doesn't call the police because my mom was so embarrassed that she was dumb enough to do all that for him. A few days later, while walking into work, she sees a bunch of cop cars surrounding the building. She later finds out by a coworker that the guy was arrested for solicitation of prostitution. At least, I think that's what he was charged for. She was freaking out that she would get in trouble for getting into that situation, but the officers never asked her to come in for questioning. 2 weeks later, while walking to her parked car in a back alley, she saw him sitting in his car watching her with a big smirk on his face. I guess he got out on bail. She ran to her car and sped out of there. That was the last time she ever saw him, and she moved back home a few months later. I don't know where to start from here, so I guess I'll just start off by saying what happened at the end of 2017. I was a new student at a small school in November of 2017. The size was around 50 kids in total. Yeah, I know, small, right? The reason I went there was because the things I was learning in that old school were just way too advanced for me. I had to transition into a school where the work was way easier and where I could focus better. It's called the Smith School, and it's based in New York City. It used to be a school for kids who had a criminal history. Now it's changed into a school with kids who have special needs. I was only there for almost a full year, and then I transferred into a bigger school. I was pretty much friends with everyone at that school because the school was so small. I even ended up dating a guy. His name was Kyle Fernandez. I believe that I had started dating him in February or March of 2018. The reason why he went to the Smith School was because he got kicked out from his previous school due to selling weed to other students at that school, and one person ended up telling on him. The first 2 to 3 months of dating him, he was pretty nice to me and to the people that went to our school, but at the same time, he was also high on drugs for most of the time. I never smoked weed, and I never will. Kyle would also sometimes take me to hang out with his outside school friends. They were also a lot like him, smoking and selling weed and have their pants sag, which would reveal their underwear. It was so eye-burning to see that crap, but Kyle loved me and I loved him. While Kyle and his friends would do that stuff that would get them in trouble, I would stay out of it. And to my miracle, Kyle never pressured me to join along with them. A few more months went on and her relationship would stay the same, until one day in July where everything changed. On that day, Kyle came over to my place at nighttime. For an hour, we were just chatting in my bedroom until my phone kept going off. It was a bunch of text messages from my friend Liam. I opened iMessage and I saw that he sent me a bunch of edgy but funny memes. I started laughing pretty hard, and then Kyle asked me, "Who's texting you?" I told him that it was just my friend Liam. He then asked me if he could see the text. I then responded by saying, "Please, it's really nothing. He's a longtime friend who makes me laugh all the time." Kyle then got really upset with me and then demanded to look at my phone. My smile then slowly faded away. I now felt a little skittish. I then muttered the word, "No." Take a guess on what happens next. I think you know. What Kyle did after I told him no was that he grabbed my phone and then threw it to the wall. Glass went everywhere, to the floor, the lamp, the top of my drawer, and on my bed. I was in disbelief with what just happened. As a reaction to what Kyle just did, I put my arms up to my face because I didn't know what he would do next. I then felt his hand grab my left arm, and then he did something that made me really change how I saw him as a person. I saw glass from my phone in his hand, and before I could even say anything or move, Kyle plunged the glass right into my arm so fast and then took it out 2 seconds later. I then screamed. I screamed so loud that probably Africa itself could even hear me. As I was still screaming, Kyle then screamed at me, "Are you happy now?" And then he ran out of my room and out of my apartment. I really wish my mother was home, but of course she wasn't. I then ran right into my bathroom and washed the stab wound with soap and water. It was hurting like hell when I did that. I then got a humongous bandage and put it on my left arm. After doing that, I went back to my phone, took the shattered screen protector off, and then proceeded to block Kyle on everything. If he tries to come and see me again, I will make it clear that I never want to see him again. To my shock, he actually never came to my house again, and I never saw him on the streets again either. But I did look around my surroundings to be safe, and indeed I was. I kept what Kyle did to me a secret, and when everyone asked what happened between me and Kyle, I just said, our relationship was just not really going in the right direction. Everyone actually seemed to believe me. I didn't let anybody know what the real reason was because I was just too scared. But me being scared all changed because of something that happened in the summer of 2023. It was early August of 2023. I was at work that day, and while working, I had felt my phone vibrating in my pocket. I took my phone out of my pocket to see who was calling me, and it was a 212 number. For the people that don't know, 212 is an area code number that is the home code in New York City. It wasn't my home phone because I knew my home phone number. I was curious to see what company was calling me, so I picked up the phone and said, "Hello?" I heard a woman on the line asking if this was me. I just replied back saying, "Yes, that's me. Who is this?" I then heard the woman say, "This is the 42nd Street New York Presbyterian Hospital, Columbia Presbyterian Medical Center calling, and I'm here to inform you that your mother, along with 10 people, have been hit by a car, and she's in critical condition." As I heard this, I felt my hand shaking while holding the phone. I tried staying in composure and then said, "I'll be there right away." I ran out of my workplace so fast without telling anyone where I was going and what happened. I got to the hospital in about 10 to 15 minutes. I asked where my mom was, and a woman at the front desk said that she was in a room right down the hall. I ran over to that room, and when I got to that room, I saw that she was in a coma. I sat down next to her crying like I've never cried before in my life. A nurse came in, and I asked her for the details of that incident. A nurse then said that a man stole a car while intoxicated, and he drove onto a wrong-way street and then onto a sidewalk, striking a cyclist at first. And then he hit a woman, which is your mom, and about 5 others, and they all just flew into each other. I was so taken back hearing this that I asked if they found out the guy's name yet. The nurse then said, "We don't know yet, but we'll probably get an answer tomorrow." The next day then came, and there was amazing news and life-shattering news. I'll start off with the good news first. The good news was that my mom woke up. The bad news is that the person who drove that vehicle that hit my mother and 6 other people was someone who I knew very well. It was Kyle. I was in such incredulity. I was going to make sure that he was not going to get away with this. Thank God he got tackled by some good Samaritans on the street, and the police have him in custody. I wanted to scream so badly, but I would just be humiliating myself by doing that. Another part about the bad news is that a couple of days later, I would find out that my mother would never be able to walk again. I felt as if my own life was over. When this news story broke out all around the country, everyone thought this was a terrorist attack. They thought that because of 7 bodies all flying into each other. I also felt very self-assured that I will tell my experiences of dating Kyle to the court and to the public, but keeping who I am private. I wrote a letter to the court where Kyle was at, and I wrote about the same time he assaulted me with the shattered glass of my phone that he threw. After this was read out in court, another woman who dated Kyle in 2022 also came forward about how she was a victim of domestic violence from Kyle. This warmed my heart because she felt inspired to tell her story as well, and that we will stick together through this. In the end, Kyle was found guilty of his domestic violence on me as well as the other women he dated, and for his drunk driving case too. After he was found guilty, he was sentenced to 2.5 years behind bars. In my honest opinion, that sentence is just way too short. It should be 20 years because of the 7 victims he unintentionally hit with the car and leaving most of them with lifetime injuries. He must have hired an amazing lawyer because of such a short sentencing. I have nothing but hatred for Kyle now after he changed my mother's life for the worse. People like him never change. I know I might be taking things out of proportion, but I'm never going to get over this, and this is how I really feel. While Kyle is serving his time in prison, I hope that he reflects on his actions that he did to hurt these people, and he goes to rehab where he changes as a person. My advice to him is that he needs to move out of New York City, which is a very toxic environment, and start a new life where he helps people instead of hurting them. For the people living in New York City, when Kyle gets out of prison and you see him on the street, please avoid him at all costs because you don't want to be his next victim. I'll start with some brief context. I had lived with an abusive male partner who didn't value my safety whatsoever. He got really mad if I didn't leave the door unlocked, and we lived in a not so great part of town. He was way older than me. I was barely 18 at the time and he was 26. Neither one of us owned a car. He worked at a Waffle House and I was getting sick constantly, so keeping a job really wasn't easy for me. He liked drugs and alcohol, and he really traumatized me in regards to both. Blamed me for his usage and would assault me while on it. Fun fact, he said if I reported his conduct, he would blame me because he was the one on the substance, even though he held me down and forced it, not me. I digress. When I finally got the courage to leave for the last time, I did it while he was at work. I begged my mom to help me get my necessities, stuff with emotional value and some clothes. Instead, she called the cops. There was a warrant for his arrest and she got a police escort just in case. Well, as soon as he got out, he immediately had started messaging me from different new numbers threatening to murder me and my family if I didn't go home with them. It didn't matter how much I blocked him, he kept at it. I was scared, but I thought for the most part I was safe. After all, he didn't have a car. I was wrong. About a week into this, he and his gun-owning friend showed up. He banged on the door and was screaming. His friend-owning gun is important to this story because he had repeatedly said that he and his friend would shoot us. My window was on the second floor facing the street, and my stomach dropped when he saw me. I immediately dropped and then army crawled to my little brother's room and then hid in the closet. His window faced the backyard. I guess my monkey brain felt safer there. I was the only one home and scared that if I breathed too loud, he'd hear me. I was terrified. I didn't want to call the police because my dumb self thought he'd hear that too. I silently texted my mom. The police arrived about 20 minutes after my mom said they were on their way. He and his friend were taken into custody after that same friend had gotten him out on bond. His friend did have a gun, but he didn't. Bottom line, I was able to get a restraining order. I'm strictly sober now, and definitely in therapy after all that. And I'm doing much better. This was the early 2000s. A lady told me about her laptop always draining the battery. The computer needed other things done to it. When I went to see her, the ex-boyfriend called her and asked if she was alone, who was there, accusing her of lies, cheating, and sleeping with other men. She hung up on him and seemed a bit rattled. She wanted to know if he could see through her camera on the computer. I checked and also disabled it because she never used it. I didn't see anything there. I opened it up to clean and checked the battery. I noticed the small device soldered to the battery terminals. It had a SIM card in it. I looked up the model and it was a tracking device. After she saw what I found out, all of her paranoia just flooded right out. She kept wondering how he knew where she was at all times, following her. He knew of conversations that she had with her friends and family. I checked her phone handset as well. A little black device, but it was a short-range recorder. At this point, I'm thinking this is a prank being played on me by some TV show or something. But her fear was genuine. I opened the alarm system box, camera recording DVR in there to a camera out the front she didn't ever know about. The camera was hidden in a fake painted brick. I said that she should call the police about this. And that's just it though. He is the police. The DVR had a hard drive in it. I plugged a screen and mouse into it. All of this was really expensive for 2003. It was installed 2 weeks ago and she broke up with him 4 months ago. The odd part was they were only together for 1 month. He never lived there, only visited. On the camera footage was him walking by several times at night. We followed a path of balding grass to a small garden shed she's not been in since she moved there. He had been living in there and outfitted the interior. He ran an Ethernet cable right into the house, power, microwave, and lots of caravan parts. A bed, a TV, a whole man cave, even a toilet which was fully functional because the shed was right next to the septic tank. He was actually in the stages of getting running water from a hose hidden under the house to the shed. Yeah, talk about crazy. Hi everyone, my name is Effie, and I'm a 29-year-old female from the UK, but I was 18 at the time this all happened. Now, before I get started, I just wanted to say I know my story isn't as creepy and scary as most, but it still scared the absolute hell out of me. So I was 18 years old at the time when I met my ex. For obvious reasons, I won't use his real name, so we'll just call him Adam. It was a Saturday night and me and my friends were all out drinking, going from bar to bar, just having a great time, and we ended up going to a nightclub to round our night off. I went out to the designated smoking area for a cigarette. I headed down the concrete stairs and into the caged area which was located at the side of the building, and I went to light my cigarette when I then realized, damn, no lighter. So I saw a guy who I grew up with in my village and I asked him if he had a lighter. He said that he didn't, but his cousin does. And standing next to him was this quite tall, muscular man with dirty blonde hair and tattoos, and I was instantly attracted. He smiled and lit the lighter for me, so I lit my cigarette and we got to talking. He told me that he was 23 and he was a farmer. He asked me some things, the normal stuff, and he told me that he thought I looked amazing. He asked me if he could buy me a drink, and of course I said yes. The night was going great. He bought me a drink and we exchanged numbers. I had to go home because I was working the next day, so I said goodbye and thanked him for the drink and then got a taxi home. I never expected to hear from him, so I went to sleep. I woke up the next morning to a text from Adam. I was super excited that this super hot guy was texting me, but remember, I was only 18. Anyway, we got texting back and forth until he had finally asked if I would like to meet up for a drink, just him and me. Like a date? I asked. Yes, a date, he replied. So we arranged a day and time to meet at the same nightclub that we had met at about 2 weeks before. I got dressed up, did my hair and makeup, and wore a tight-fitting white and navy dress and headed out. When I arrived at the club, he was nowhere to be seen. Weird, I thought. He was supposed to be meeting me at the door, so I texted him. No reply. I decided to call him and he answered. Like right away, I could hear the loud music and drunk people right away in the background. You guessed it, he'd gone inside without me. I was a little annoyed but thought nothing of it. I show the bouncer my ID and head inside. I go upstairs and start looking for him. I find him out of the smoking area chatting to some women. Now, this should have been the first red flag, but again, I was 18. I saw his looks and I was hooked, so I let it slide. Probably my biggest mistake. Anyway, he sees me and we head back in, had a few drinks, got to know each other a little better, and the night went off without a hitch. I really liked this guy. He was hot, built like a tank, and a real smooth talker. Fast forward a few weeks, and this is where things started to get weird. So by now we're dating, and he asked me if I wanted to stay over at his house for the first time, and I said yes. When we get there, the first thing I noticed is another car parked outside. We go inside, head into the kitchen, and to my shock, his mom and dad are sitting at their table. Yes, he failed to tell me that he still lived with his parents. So I was introduced and Adam went outside with his dad while I was left inside with his mom. She was nice enough but barely spoke a word to me. It was late afternoon and Adam had stayed outside with his dad and his mom joined them. So there I was left alone in this guy's house. I decided to head outside too. Don't know why I bothered as no one said a word to me until it was time to go to bed. Adam then said to me, Are you coming?" So like a lost lamb, I followed him into the bedroom. Well, we ended up having sex, and then he said to me before we fell asleep, "Oh, by the way, I need to take you home at 5 a.m. I'm working in the morning." Then he goes to sleep, not another word said. So I closed my eyes and went to sleep too. Now, I know what you're thinking. This is just a story about a guy who was using you. It's not even creepy. Well, I'm about to tell you what really scared me about him. Those were just the red flags that I really should have paid attention to at the beginning. One day we were at his house, just the two of us. We were in the kitchen, and he was making a cup of coffee. We were just chatting about random things when all of a sudden he grabs me by the throat and then pins me against the wall with full rage in his eyes. Now, I'm only 4'11", and he was about 6 foot and built like a tank. So he had pinned me against the wall by my throat, and he was serious. He looked so angry and his eyes were empty when he then said, "One good hard squeeze and you're done. Are you scared?" I was absolutely terrified, but I didn't want to show it. He just stayed like that for about a minute. When he finally lets go, he starts laughing. Yes, laughing, like it was some sort of joke. I waited 10 minutes and told him that I wasn't feeling well, and I got him to take me home. I wish that I could say that was the only incident, but it wasn't. Whenever we would go out, he would bring his mates and spend all night with them. I would be following along like a little sheep, but if he saw me talking to another guy, just friendly talk mind you, or another guy even looked at me, he would stare at me in front of his friends, embarrassing the crap out of me and making me feel like I was nothing. Or I would tell him I was hanging out with my friends, and he would text me later the same night asking me, "Hey, what are you doing?" I would tell him I was out with my friends, and he would say that I never told him that, and that I'm lying to him. He would say that I'm not where I was, and that he knows I was with another guy. I literally never was. All of my friends were female. Again, another red flag, right? I ignored them again until a few months later. This is when Adam really scared the living hell out of me. So he had finally had his own place at this point, and it was on the new farm where he worked. Now, when I say this place was in the middle of nowhere, it was literally in the middle of nowhere. You had to drive for about 15 to 20 minutes through a one-way small country road, which was more like a forest. So we got there, we watched a movie, and you guessed it, ended up in bed. Well, afterwards I wanted a cigarette, and it was pitch black out by this point. So I got my clothes on and went outside into the backyard. You could barely see anything but a couple of feet in front of you because of the badly lit porch light. So I'm smoking away when all of a sudden something catches my eye. It's a tree stump with a red hatchet sticking out of it. Well, bearing in mind it was dark and in the middle of nowhere, I was kind of startled. All sorts of things running through my head. That's when Adam comes out and catches me looking at it. He walks over to the hatchet, pulls it out, and starts walking slowly towards me. And as he gets closer, he put the hatchet to my neck and says, "You know, I could kill you right now and no one would ever hear you scream. I could chop you up into tiny little pieces and feed you to the pigs and no one would ever find you." He stares at me like he was actually about to stick that damn hatchet in my neck, but he didn't. Instead, he pulled the hatchet away from me and his face changed. He started laughing maniacally and hysterically again. What the actual hell? By this point, I'm so scared I didn't know what to do, so I just started laughing along with them. We go back inside and he makes me a coffee. I sip it for about 10 minutes and tell him that I have to work in the morning and I would really appreciate it if he took me home, and he did. I ended up blocking his number and all of his social media accounts as soon as I got home. There was no way I was going to stay in a relationship with someone like that, someone that crazy. I think we all know that I wouldn't be here right now if I did. I'm just thankful he didn't actually harm me that night. I know most of you will be thinking he was just playing around. I would too, but you weren't there. You didn't see the blank look in his eyes when he did this. I actually thought he was going to kill me. I'm 29 now, have a 9-year-old daughter, and I'm more cautious when choosing the men that I let into my life. I heard last year that during the time I dated him, he was using some hard drugs, so he wasn't in his right mind. I'm sharing the story in hopes some young women will recognize the signs like I did just before it's too late. For privacy reasons, I'm going to call myself Emma and my ex Daniel. I met my ex Daniel off a popular friends app. At the time, I was pretty heartbroken and I wasn't really looking for anything. We lived about an hour away from each other. We spoke here and there, but there really wasn't anything there. One time I ended up in a city, so we met and it all just started from there. Now looking back, I was young and dumb. I had a bad relationship with boys, so when he did less than the bare minimum, I stuck with it. We got on like a house on fire, and after a few meetings, we ended up confessing that we liked each other. However, I didn't want a relationship. He did ask me out, but I didn't want a relationship because of my past experiences. After some time, we started getting into really bad arguments, and at this point, my mental health was really bad. So after a few arguments and not being able to fix it for my own sake, I left. However, it played on my heart a lot. After a few months, I saw it was his birthday, and I was really thinking about him, so I decided to message him happy birthday. And from there on, we met and we actually officially started dating. Now, after a few weeks, it goes back to old times and we start arguing bad again. Bear in mind, we had met at the start of the year, and now this is getting towards summertime. However, at this point, I feel guilty for leaving as I thought I didn't give it a good enough try. So when I should have left, I stayed due to guilt. Big mistake. Towards the end of our relationship, I would have to beg him to come out to see me. Remember how I said that we lived an hour away? I would always end up going to meet him and I'd still have to beg him to come. One time we met, he was so awful to me, I actually nearly started crying. I know that I should have left. At this point, he was actually going to his home country for the summer, and this was when it was getting really bad. After he went, I decided enough was enough. It was toxic, and he was getting more and more uncomfortable and treating me like crap, and I talked to him, but he just didn't care. I loved him way too much to leave, but after he left, I decided to break up with him. Radio silence. Months and months pass by until I get a random message request. I look at the profile and I automatically assume it's a bot. However, the message is someone's bank details. I check their following and the only person they follow is my ex. Immediate red flag. I message them what's going on. Who is this? No answer. Curiosity hits me and I decide to message my ex and he shrugs it off. After some time, the account messages back. Now for reference, let me call her Amelia. Amelia name drops my ex and then says, "Do you know what sort of person Daniel really is? He takes girls to his house and then dumps them. Pretty nice, right?" At this point, me and Daniel have been broken up for a few months, so I don't care and proceed to tell her, but curiosity really kicks in, and I ask her how long it's been. She says that she's been involved with them since the start of the year. Suddenly, it all makes sense. I ask for proof and she delivers. I confronted Daniel and he couldn't care less. He shrugged it off and said, "Did I cheat? My bad, I guess." Barely even comprehending that my ex was cheating on me the entire time we spoke, Amelia starts having a breakdown saying she's going to kill herself, etc. How he will pay for what he did using her because they were never official. He never even complimented her or said that he loved her or even asked her out. With me, he did that several times. She even said how he saw her for lust. After some time, I realize Amelia is clearly unhinged and just wants him back even after finding out she was the other woman and that he had a girlfriend the entire time. I end up losing my crap with Amelia because it ends up getting to be too much for me dealing with her outbursts when I barely had time to process. I was the one who got cheated on, yet I was dealing with her mess. Stupidly, after some time when Amelia went ghost, I went back to Daniel because I missed him. Side note, we did not date. Just had a few meetups. We were still arguing at this point, and one time we had such a bad argument because I realized that he took advantage of me that no matter what, I'd always go back. This man made me relapse and would call me every name under the sun and treated me like pure crap. And here's me like some clown just always running back, and I know it now. I was self-aware and I said I'd never see him again. You know what triggered my cold response? Him saying that he had no remorse for what he did and mockingly thanking me for being a part of it and being so unaware. Funnily enough, after this argument, he had asked to meet. I said sure for closure. This was the last time we met. He was in one of his moods again, and at this point he came down to the hour to meet me. Rare, I know. Afterwards, we waited for his bus, and when his bus came, he left without a word. I had to pass his bus to get to where I needed to, and I still remember the look on his face. He was smirking. After I went home, I blocked him on everything, and I didn't look back. It's been nearly 2 months now. There's so much missed out on this. So much pain, so much hurt. I still love him. He was my first love, even though he was so awful. A few days ago, my friend found him on the same app. He messaged her hitting on her. Normally, I wouldn't be bothered, but he knew who she was. In fact, he met her with me once or twice. He knew her face and name, and he deliberately did this just to hurt me. I still don't know why he treated me so awful. I'm still healing from this. My name is Molly. I'm 22 and I think I might have avoided dating a murderer. This started about a month ago. I found out my new ex-boyfriend was cheating on me and dumped him after finding out. There were also other things that led up to this, but this was the final nail in the coffin for this relationship. His excuse for cheating on me was that he wasn't over the death of his first wife, which doesn't make any sense at all, and I'm going to get into her death. While my ex and I were dating, he told me that his first wife passed away due to depression 2 years prior. You can all gather what that means. And of course, this really pulled at my heartstrings, and I felt for him. He then told me that his best friend did the same thing exactly 2 months later. Pretty weird, right? At the time, I thought this was strange, but didn't lean more into it out of respect for my ex and the trauma that it caused. Having my own struggles with that, I didn't want to question it further. But after breaking up with him, things aren't making any sense. Firstly, he told me 2 completely different stories as to the methods and how they offed themselves. The way he told me that his wife did it the first time he told me is physically impossible. If you all know Kurt Cobain's story, put 2 and 2 together minus the drugs. In the back of my mind, I knew it'd be impossible, especially since it happened in a car as well. I decided to ask him about it one day, and he was irate that I would even question it. He also told me that he never said it was a .22, that it was a pistol instead. Now, I'll admit I'm forgetful, but details like that you don't just forget. I asked him why he'd tell me it was a .22 and not a pistol, and he said that he misspoke and did not bring it up again. That set alarm bells for me. Why? Because he was an avid gun guy. He's someone that can take apart a gun he's never touched or fired and put it back together again. So why would he simply say it was one type when it was a completely different gun entirely? Now his best friend. He told me that the autopsy revealed that there were ligature marks around the neck, with a talk screen off the charts but internal bruising. If you've seen my posts before, you'll know that I'm a mortician's kid with a degree in criminal justice in hopes of working in crime scene. So I'm not ignorant to suspicious things like this. I again tell him that it's odd, and again he gets pissed, telling me that I'm stupid, that I don't know what I'm talking about, and to not bring it up again. I don't know if I'm overthinking it or something else, but I don't have a good feeling about any of this. I've started looking into all of this further, and I'm going to talk to some of my old professors who are in law enforcement about what they think. This story is still ongoing. Update. It's been a few months and I've delved into looking into the death of his first wife. I was able to find her obituary, where I found out she wasn't even living with him at the time of her death. Instead, she was living in their home state the entire time. I did the math and he had traveled up to that state the weekend before she passed away. He traveled back to the state he was living in the day after she had died too. Then I also remembered that he had told me before that he had made his own mother clean out the car after his wife did what she did. Usually there are people who clean scenes like that since it's dealing with biological waste, human remains, so on and so forth. He then told me that he never saw a reason to get a crime scene cleanup crew to clean up the car when his own mother was perfectly capable of doing it. I'm not sure if it's just me, but my mother would never do that for me. especially if it was her daughter-in-law who had offed herself in the car. His first wife's family also refuses to speak with him and will not allow him on their premises. He cremated her too, after telling me that she never wanted to be, but that he just couldn't part with her. See what I mean? He also sold the car to a scrap lot a week after, therefore ridding himself of the car and sort of proving my point that there's really something fishy about her whole death. I also found out more about his best friend. He had posted a TikTok in memory of him, but the comments that I saw, his mother was telling him that he had no right to post the video and to take it down. He deleted the TikTok right after the family had started commenting on it. I never got the chance myself to see all of the comments, but the ones I did see were angry and disgusted that he would even post such a thing. The last thing is that he married the woman that he was cheating on me with. They only knew each other 2 months before she moved away with him and married his sorry ass, her 2 kids in tow. He's also creepily close to her minor daughter. Like, I've been told by other people that he would sleep on the couch with her cuddled up. I've done research on that as well, and I found out that the state they moved to has a consent age of 16. You can draw conclusions from that as well. I don't know. I still have a really bad gut feeling about this man. I'm keeping tabs on him and his wife now, but I think they're both watching my Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram accounts from ghost accounts. Every now and then I'll get a comment from a random account with no videos or pictures on it, saying weird and concerning things. I really don't know what to think. I'm trans, female to male, and 6 years ago I had bottom surgery. It was really hard on my body, and I had a lot of complications, even prior to the story that I'm going to tell you. To this date, I've had 75 surgeries for this. At the time, I was 22. I met a boy online a year after my surgeries. I was in a pretty good spot with complications. We lived in different states, and he was also transitioning from female to male. After a month of being official, he said he was about to be homeless, so I asked him to move here. I was living with a friend and she gave us about a month to find our own place, which was fine. He began causing tension and issues between her and I to the point that we ended up homeless, me, him, and my service dog. He went home to get money from family, and my dog and I in the middle of winter slept in a parking lot in an SUV. Eventually, we ended up in an apartment with a local person in the community. My ex and I ended up splitting up a week after signing the lease, but luckily had separate rooms. My ex had made friends with someone named Elle, and eventually I got close to Elle as well. And as time went on, Elle was really helpful on trying to keep tensions away as they grew between my ex and I. One day we got into a huge fight, and I'm not ashamed to admit that I was the one who started it by yelling at him and then tossing something of his into his room on his floor. He got in my face trying to trigger my PTSD, knowing I would act out. I went to push him and he fell back on his bed. At this point in time, I was still walking with a cane due to severe complications, so I wasn't strong. Also, he was a black belt who went to the gym 2+ times a day. He pulled back and then intentionally kicked me between the legs, and when I fell forward in pain, bit into my collarbone, which I didn't notice until the adrenaline came down. He then went across the hall into my room and pushed my air conditioner out of my window to leave the house, claiming I was stopping him. I called Elle crying and hyperventilating, trying to tell them what happened. They came over and my ex was sitting on the steps of our porch. They then said, "You bit him?" And my ex then smiled and said, "I sure did." Elle took me to the hospital where a social worker and 2 police officers sat and took my statement. The female officer told me that because I had legally changed my gender marker from female to male and he hadn't, I was the aggressor, and that if I pressed charges, I would be the one with aggravated assault. So I did it. I had 4 surgeries at the time to correct the damage he caused. Months had passed and a second occurrence happened. This time I called the police to the house. They made him leave. My friend happened to be over, and she had sat while the police escorted him out and told me that I needed to get a restraining order and that the police officer before lied to me. More than likely due to transphobia, since she kept saying my bottom surgery and gender marker was why I was in the wrong because he was still considered a woman. After a whole lot of tension and drama, we all moved out. And one day I was on a post about some abuse happening between a couple of influencers in our little community, and my ex's friend's wife proudly commented that I shouldn't say shit because my ex beat the shit out of me, as well as other demeaning things, basically blaming me for being abused. To this day, I'm in a happy, healthy relationship, and I'm nowhere near done fixing the physical damage that he caused my urethra and other bottom parts in that area, including my bladder tearing open and apart from the urethra. It's 4 years later, and I'm now on disability and constantly suffering from paranoia and crippling anxiety and depression, as well as borderline personality disorder, derealization and depersonalization disorder, and PTSD. I am so thankful to be able to send this story out there because I recently began my trauma work for it, and it's been making my life very difficult. Domestic violence is never okay, and if officials aren't taking you seriously, please seek out other officials. Had I done that, a second occurrence wouldn't have happened. Stay safe. Trigger warning for domestic violence and abuse. His name will be changed for my safety, so just keep in mind while reading. I was just a sophomore in high school, and I fell hard for a quiet new kid, and I thought he was my forever. Crazy how I actually would later marry him just 1 week after graduation. High school sweethearts. Looking back now, I can see how many red flags I noticed but ignored just because I was young, rushing to be grown. The night before my wedding day, I was going over last-minute wedding details with my mom, who's easily one of the most caring and selfless people that I know. So bless my sweet mama's heart when I asked her if she'd be mad if I decided that I didn't want to go through with the wedding. The wedding was the next day, by the way. But me being me, Mom thought I was just messing with her. I couldn't tell her the truth of what was going on now, so I just took a deep breath and forced a believable chuckle. She genuinely thought I was just pulling another one of my jokes. I went on to finally tell her the truth almost a year after I escaped him, and she still feels bad not taking it seriously. No one knew what was going on behind closed doors, but it makes sense. I was honestly his biggest PR team. Only 2 hours passed since saying I do's, and he was throwing me out of the truck in my parents' driveway, cussing and yelling that he wanted a divorce, then recklessly driving off. Yeah, so much for all that honeymoon phase on our actual honeymoon. I ran inside and my dad came out of the bedroom and he couldn't understand a word I'm saying because he's basically trying to ask me what was happening, and I said it as clearly as I could while uncontrollably sobbing. He left me. How could he? On our honeymoon. My dad was pissed, but then relaxed and tried to rationalize the situation. Like maybe he forgot something, pulling a bad joke or something like that. Then we see his truck flying in our driveway, and my dad smiles and says, "See, he's right there." I wipe my tears and walk out of the door, and then tell them yes, it was a prank. But on the inside, I was screaming. I was so embarrassed for myself because now I look crazy. But if I wanted to save this relationship, they could never know the truth. Months go by and he starts being sweeter ever since we got to be long distance because he was in the military at training. But soon I would be packing up my life and moving to Texas with him. I could tell my parents were starting to see the cracks that I'd worked so hard to glue together. My mom even picked up my phone on the table, mistaking it for hers, and she saw this huge message from my ex and just started crying, begging me to stay because he wasn't a good person. But I assured her that this was way out of character for him and that he was just lonely. I obviously lied. I knew she didn't believe me, but she also knew that I was stubborn and I was going to do whatever I wanted regardless of her concerns. After just a few weeks in Texas, I knew that my life was in danger. It was Thanksgiving Day, and my family just called to check up on us and just tell us Happy Thanksgiving. And the moment I hung up, the man I thought was my soulmate started cussing me out, saying that I needed to stop talking to my family because he was my family now. I let out a little cackle, thinking that he's gotta be joking. And no joke. He picks up our wedding glasses, the ones that I had specifically had made for us, and then throws them directly at me, shattering all around me. Shocked, I didn't know what to do, so I walked over to the broom and started sweeping up the broken glass. You may read this and think surely he would be done throwing a tantrum by now, but no. He then throws pictured frames at me while I'm sweeping up the glass. Honestly, that broken glass on the wood floor was really just a metaphor for any love I had left towards this man. I broke that night. I stopped seeing him as my other half and more as the monster that I'm now stuck with. I became very depressed, and he loved that. He would break me down over and over again just to get a reaction. 2 months go by, and one night he completely lost his shit over the washer and dryer people messing up the days they were supposed to come out, and he started pacing back and forth mumbling words that I couldn't quite make out. But he demanded that I call and fix it, then grabbing me and set me on the couch, telling me what to say and that I better not fuck it up. This man was paranoid as fuck, making comments that they were doing it because he was a soldier. Then he started blaming me even though I wasn't even around him when he first called in the first place. But he still yelled at me for hours until snap, he walked into the bedroom. Me, you ask? I'm on the couch still processing that fucking moment. Our conversation went like this. You're so fucking stupid. This is all your fault. Did you plan this all out with the workers just to make me look dumb? Or are you really just that fucking dumb? Huh, you fucking bitch? Yeah, that's what I fucking thought. You fucking no good bitch. You know what? I'm done. You won't do anything except complain and bitch at me, blaming me for everything. All you do is cuss and yell at me for no damn reason. He looked at me with this look that I've heard from other victims try and describe. And the best I can describe it is just a deep darkness in his eyes, like an emptiness that still causes me nightmares to this day. Without hesitation, he lunges at me in the middle of the day with our curtains open, door wide open, and our neighbors out and about. He throws me against the wall and starts choking me. I slowly see black, but he lets go only for a second because he then slammed my entire body to the floor. At the moment, I'm either blacked out or my brain was trying to shield myself from what the hell was happening. But piece by piece, I would come to, and he was holding me by my shoulders and just repeatedly slammed me on the wooden floor. My screams were ignored by all of the people outside. I pleaded for anyone to call the police and repeatedly yelled for help over and over. My fight or flight takes over, and I chose flight. I run to the main bathroom and then lock the door, frantically calling my mom because in that moment I just wanted to hear her voice. But my poor mom didn't know the nightmare on that phone call until it was way too late. She was with my sister and dad, and she had put me on speakerphone because we usually do this so they can all talk to me like we were all there together. But instead, they hear me screaming for my life, and they hear my ex calling me awful names and telling me to get my ass in there and to unlock the door. They were confused, and my dad was ready to come kill this asshole himself. But then silence. No more banging. Just me softly crying and just trying to calm my mother over the phone that I'm alright, and that I know that I need to leave him, but that I had to do it in the safest way possible because if he were to catch me, I might not make it out with my life. When I walk out of the room, my ex is just sitting there with a blank stare, like he had no recollection of his outburst. But that day was the beginning of my escape. It was 2 a.m. Keys to my Pontiac were on the kitchen table, and he was asleep in the bedroom that I wasn't allowed in there several days earlier. I busted out of the guest bedroom that was my prison and beelined to the front door quietly, but also as quickly as possible. I then drove 9.5 hours to my home state, only stopping once in Dallas, Texas to fill up on gas. With every mile in my rearview mirror, I felt something inside that reassured me. I'm free now. I'm forever scared, and most of my inner wounds have healed or faded. I 100% believe had I stayed with him, I'd be 6 feet deep down into the ground. So to my abusive ex-husband that I fled from that late February night, I pray to God that I never ever have to see you again. The story is from when I was 13 and then 16 years old. For a bit of context about me, which is relevant to this story, I'm a pansexual female, and I've been out of the closet since I was 15. When I was in my teens, I had met a lot of people online. It was during the time of MySpace and my yearbook, and talking with strangers wasn't uncommon. During this time, I had several online accounts on several websites, and sometimes would leave one account behind to make a new one, sometimes on the same website, sometimes on a different one, for who knows why. On my first My Yearbook account when I was 13, I had made a friend who I'll call Crystal for the purposes of this story. Crystal was very nice, and we had some chats here and again, but nothing serious. When I left my account, I also left behind all the random internet friends who I wasn't close with. Well, fast forward when I was about 16, I don't recall what website I was using, but I once again met Crystal. This wasn't odd as we actually only lived about an hour apart, and some of these sites would show you people who are generally close to your location. Well, we got to chatting and she told me that she had been in love with me and that I had broken her heart when I disappeared. Okay, now I feel like an asshole. I apologize and she seems to accept this, but then she asked me if I remembered what our relationship had been like. Relationship? We had only chatted every once in a while. We were friendly. So I told her I remembered chatting with her and that I had considered her a friend at the time, and that I was really happy to be able to catch up with her. Well, that's when this girl tells me we were a couple, that we were in an actual relationship. What? I asked her if she was being serious, and she said she was, that we had dated for nearly 3 years, that we had apparently talked about getting married and planning a future together. Now, I know that this was absolute bullshit. I had a boyfriend when I was 13 who I stayed with until I was almost 15, and I loved him very much and would have never cheated on him. I actually still loved him when I broke up with him, but his parents didn't want us together, and after 6 months of keeping us apart, I just decided it would be easier for both of us to end our relationship. Why would I cheat on someone that I cared so much for with a girl that I barely knew? Well, I didn't want to start trouble or argue, so I just told her something along the lines of, "Oh, well, I'm sorry, I don't really remember that," and I thought that would be it. Well, I was wrong. She asked me how I felt about her now, and if we could get back together. Now, I don't know if anyone has noticed, but to put it simply, even putting aside the total insanity of her claim, the math just doesn't add up. So look, I met her online 3 years before these events, but we dated for 3 years? At the time, I brushed it off, thinking maybe she misunderstood our relationship. Maybe she mistook me for someone else. Anything. So I told her to let me think about it, and we continued chatting normally for about another week with no further insanity. I spoke with Crystal every day for that week, and then she asked me again if we could get back together. I mean, I was single at the time, so for whatever stupid reason, I agreed. Things went well for all of maybe 2 weeks. In those 2 weeks, Crystal had sent me a photo of an engagement ring that she had apparently gotten me when we dated before. That was weird, but I already knew this was going to be a short-lived thing, so I didn't worry about it too much and just glossed over this complete lunacy. Well, come to the second weekend after we became a couple, and I went to my best friend's house for the weekend. She lived over an hour away from me, so I would go to her house on Friday and get picked up on Sunday afternoon. I did this regularly, and Crystal knew ahead of time that I wouldn't be calling her Friday or Saturday as well, as that my texting wouldn't be as frequent. Well, I wasn't seriously invested in this relationship. I mean, I did respect the relationship, and I made sure to be open and honest with her about where I would be, who I would be with, and whatever we were up to. I would text her as I found the time, but I was really focusing on spending time with my friend. Needless to say, none of this sat well with her, and I mean it all. Friday night went okay, and Saturday was okay until that evening. By around 8 p.m., Crystal had texted me and pestered me enough to really get on my nerves, and then she started calling me. She was demanding to know where I was and who I was with, even though I had already told her prior. I told her again, and I told her that I really couldn't talk right now, as my friend and I were spending time together. We were at a public park just swinging on a swing set and talking about random stuff and everything that came up, including how Crystal was trying my patience. I then told her that it would be very rude for me to be on the phone and that I would call her the following evening. She didn't like that. She insisted that I stay on the phone with her. I told her no and then hung up. I wasn't dealing with her crazy right then and there. She proceeded to call again and again and again, over and over, more than 20 times. I finally answered and I asked her what the fuck her deal was. She then accused me of ignoring her all weekend long, as well as some other stuff that I don't really recall. I was done. I then told her,
"You know what? I'm not doing this anymore. We're over. Goodbye."
And then I hung up again. This was before you could block numbers with the simple push of a button, so I just turned my phone off. For the next couple of weeks, she would call, text, email, and message me on various sites begging me to take her back. I blocked her where I could and ignored her where I couldn't. She eventually gave up. She's popped up a few times over the years. She'll still message me and ask me how I'm doing. I'm 29 now and happily married to a wonderful man. The last time she popped up was about 6 years ago. I actually spoke with her a bit. I figured it had been some 10 years or so, and she used to be my friend, so let's just see how this goes. Well, between her having an obsessive girlfriend herself at the time who caused her no end of trouble, and her still making every effort to flirt with me, I did not stay in touch. I haven't heard from her since, and if I don't hear from her again for another 6, well, that'll be perfectly fine by me. So I work at a multi-billion-dollar retail chain, and besides my main other department, which is also in the back room, there's a second department that I'm cross-trained in that I work in for a couple of hours each morning and every Saturday accepting deliveries. Now, I'm of average build, not overweight, but not as slender as I used to be. I have kids, so I have a bit of a mommy tummy that I've fought to get rid of for years. I think I look average, but used to get a lot of attention back in the day from young men, around when I was in my 20s. I'm now in my mid-30s, and although I look a little younger, it's not by as much as it used to be. These days, the only guys eyeing me up are 10 plus years older than me, and yeah, not usually attractive either. I'm married and I'm not looking for a replacement either. I love my husband. There's a good variety of delivery drivers who deliver to my store, and I know many of the regulars by name. Every now and then there's a new driver or substitute driver for one of the companies, but for the most part it's the same people. So there's a regular driver who comes in every Saturday to deliver milk. We'll call him Mike. He's mid-50s and nearing retirement age for the company he works for. He's friendly and cheerful, and he always greets everyone happily. He also loves making jokes. I've always thought he was pretty cool, and even said that he was my favorite delivery driver since he's so nice. I think he may have gotten the wrong idea though. When I first started there, the other lady who used to substitute in that department had warned me that Mike was a terrible flirt, and that he liked to try and get with all of the ladies. I kinda just shrugged it off. I didn't think it was a big deal. Over the past year, he said that I'm his favorite receiving person and that I'm beautiful. He's been very flirty, and he even asked me out on lunch dates. I have always declined and told him I'm married. That hasn't deterred him in the least. He could care less about that. Mike has gotten friendly enough to even show me pictures and videos of trips that he's been on and whatnot. Last week he showed me a video of the drive up his driveway and views around his 300 acres of land. I thought that was rather odd though. I mean, why show someone your driveway all of a sudden and show off your land? What was his goal in this? He started calling me a nickname recently too, which no one had ever really called me, as it was something only my creeper dad ever called me. Even my husband knows to steer clear of that nickname because it triggers me. It's an obvious nickname for my name, but no one uses it. Kinda like Mike is a nickname for Michael or Kate for Caitlin. Well, yesterday just before he left, he said something that I wasn't expecting. Mike had asked if he could shrink wrap me and take me home with them. I gave him a firm and immediate no. This immediately made me think of a murder that happened in this area before I moved out here, where a woman was saran wrapped by her boyfriend and dumped naked and saran wrapped on the side of the highway. The police were never able to connect the guy to the murder, though the locals knew that he had to be the one who did it, and I was told that he left the area after that. The more I think of his question, the more creeped out I get. I wonder if I should report it to management, or just tell him to cut that crap out the next time I see him as a warning. My company prefers people to tell harassers to stop before reporting an issue, but I'm not sure if this falls into that category, or if it's creepy enough to be something that I should just report right away. All I know is I'm really uncomfortable having to see him again next Saturday when he delivers again. Update. I took my manager aside and told her the situation, and she agreed that it definitely wasn't appropriate and that she wants a written statement from me on the matter. So I guess we'll see how it's handled. If he stops delivering to my store or stops being creepy, I'll know it's been handled properly. Second update. I talked to my assistant manager on Friday, and she said that it was being handled by ethics, so not at the store level. I told her that I was thinking of having my supervisor shadow me while the guy was there on Saturday. Saturday morning came though, and I felt like crap, and I didn't really want to have to deal with him on top of already feeling tired, so I just called out. Some poor support manager had to deal with him instead. I don't know how long it's going to take them to address the issue, but I really hope it's soon. Update number 3. So my case is back to being investigated at store level again. Did the statement and answered questions and whatnot. Won't know anything for a while, I'm guessing. I asked for any guarantees that they could keep me safe. None were given. They just said they're looking into it and that if I have further issues to notify them. Oh yeah, that makes me feel so much safer, totally. Update number 4. Today I was really anxious to go to work, as I know it's the day that the creepy guy delivers milk. The closer it got to 7:30 a.m., the more nervous I got. Just before 7:30 a.m., I went down to my other work area on the opposite side of the back room. It's a huge store, so it's approximately 600 feet away or so. When I got down there, I discovered that my supervisor wasn't there as I had feared, and my anxiety only grew. When I got back to my area, there were only a few merchandisers milling about, loading up their products onto carts and whatnot. I didn't see any other managers, including the one that I had spoken to earlier in the day to confirm that he would be present and nearby to give me some sense of security. In a moment of desperation, I thought back to what my coworker had told me just yesterday, and that was to ask a female coworker to stay with me and look out for me. So I asked one, and she said yes. We waited in the back room, distracting ourselves with meaningless tasks to pass the time. Before I knew it, a half hour went by, then an hour, and then another hour. No milk. I just went to lunch and thanked my coworker for humoring me and staying nearby. After lunch, I had checked to see if the milk ever came, but it hadn't. I was pretty happy that I didn't have to see him for another week at least. Then later, I was pulled into the office at the end of my shift. The manager then told me that as of today, that man Mike is no longer permitted in our store. He can't even deliver there or even shop there. So now they have to rearrange our delivery schedule for milk. But I was honestly just so relieved. I told the manager that I felt very relieved and thanked him for letting me know. It's really like a weight has finally been lifted off my chest. This happened about a year and a half ago. I was at work, night shift a little past midnight, and I had ordered DoorDash for myself and my supervisor since it was her birthday. I was happy to see that I had the same driver as last time, as I work in a small building among other identical buildings with a convoluted road system in between them all. It had been a little confusing for someone not used to it. I had been watching the map and I went outside once it was close by. I stood under a cluster of bright lights in our parking lot, wearing neon yellow. You couldn't miss me. Immediately, I got a call from my driver asking me to come to him. I look around and I don't see anyone until I walk a couple of yards to the center of the lot. He's sitting on the side of my building right by the dumpster where there's no light. He also has his lights off. I'm thinking, what the hell, dude? I start waving my arms and telling him I'm in front of the building. He's on the side. He hangs up and just chills there for a minute. At this point, I'm really annoyed because our food is getting cold, and this guy delivered to me in this exact same spot like a week before. Finally, he turns his lights on and he comes over to me. As soon as he pulls up, he's speaking another language into his phone, which then translates to English. Something like, "Hello, I'm practicing English. I need new friends. Will you be my friend?" And then he puts the phone towards me. I feel like I'm speaking with a child because hello, this is really inappropriate. And I just say, "Oh, that's a cool app." And then I look at him, waiting for my food. He keeps speaking into the app about needing friends. And I tell him that my supervisor is waiting for me, and I reach my hand out for the food. He tries to touch my hand and then he asks for my number. At this point, the fact that he tried to get me in the dark plus his persistence had turned my growing annoyance into fear. I tell him I need the food, and he asks me to get in his car in perfect English. Thank the Lord at this moment, someone at my sister building comes out and makes their way over to the lot. He finally gives me my food and scurries off, which freaked me out. Why after all that would he speed off at the sight of another person? Clearly his intentions were not good. I reported all of this to DoorDash at the time, as well as to my local police and social media. And it turns out he had done this to someone else who lives 2 miles away from me. She had also ordered late at night, and he apparently asked her if she lived alone and if they could hang out while holding her food hostage. DoorDash assured me that they had deactivated him, but his boldness plus the fact that he seems to only drive late at night makes me think that he does this a lot, and he's probably already assaulted someone before. This is a long story, so stick with me. I, a 23-year-old female, am a bartender. I have some crazy stories where I've been genuinely scared for my life, but this has got to be the worst. I'm working a double at the restaurant. Around 11 a.m., a delivery man comes in with a package that I had to sign for. He comes, I sign for the package, and I tell him to have a good day with a smile. I continue my shift as usual. This was a Friday or Saturday. I can't remember specifically, but later on we got busy. The restaurant and parking lot was totally full. I see a lot of different people daily. Plus, seeing someone for the second time ever out of their uniform, you may not recognize them. The FedEx driver comes and sits at the bar. I don't obviously remember him from the 25-second interaction that we had that morning. I started talking to him as I do all my customers. I get him a drink, appetizer, another drink, entree, etc. Our conversation started.
"So, how long have you worked here?"
"Oh, a few years. I've worked my way up."
"I see. How do you like it here?"
Just a regular conversation with the bar guest. It slowly became not so regular. He asked me if I had a boyfriend, and I said yes. He would change the subject and then go back to complimenting me, saying how beautiful I was every few minutes.
"Can I have your number?"
"No, I don't think my boyfriend would appreciate that."
"Okay, well, what's your last name? Could we just be Facebook friends?"
All annoying but normal interactions that I've had with men in the industry. He started to become really pushy over time, pressing for my phone number or social media. I continued to politely decline and laugh it off. He then tells me,
"I actually came this morning to drop off a package with FedEx. You signed for it? I came back just for you."
I smile and continue with my stupid customer service. "Oh yeah, I remember you," then smile and laugh it off. I even stepped in the back to vent to my manager at this point about how he was being extra pushy and uncomfortable. Flash forward about an hour, he pays his tab and leaves. I'm just glad he's gone at this point. We'll say as a guess it's about 7 p.m. when he leaves. We're still busy and we close at 10. We finish dinner service, customers slowly start to leave, and the restaurant is finally empty. I've been cleaning for a while and I'm finally finishing up. It's about 10:30 at this point. I'm cleaning the bar and I look up. The whole front of the restaurant that I'm facing consists of large windows that face the parking lot, and I see one car in the parking lot. I notice that the delivery driver / guest from earlier is standing outside of the car walking around it and seeming like he's cleaning the back seat out. Doors open and he's leaning in and out with the bag. As soon as I realized it was him who had left almost 4 hours ago, my heart sank. Why was he still here? Why was he cleaning the back seat out? I freak out. My manager and I are the only people left in the restaurant at this point. It's almost 11. I ran to her and I told her everything about how he came back just for me and about how he had seemingly left 4 hours ago, and I made her come from the back of the restaurant to behind the bar up the front so she could see him in the parking lot to, I don't know, be waiting for me. She says she's gonna call the police. At this point, my boyfriend and I had an apartment literally 5 minutes away from the restaurant. I told her not to worry about it. I'll just call my boyfriend to come get me. I did just that, but my boyfriend could immediately tell something was wrong, and when I'm scared and anxious, I ramble. So I gave him a quick debriefing of what was going on. He said he would be there soon, and I hung up. My manager made me sit in the office until he got there, so I didn't see this go down. All I remember is my boyfriend coming into the restaurant to get me, walking me to the car through the back door and getting me home. My boyfriend, who's very confrontational and protective, later tells me that he pulled into the parking lot to see the FedEx driver sitting in the driver's seat of his car. My boyfriend walked up to his car and knocked on the window for him to roll it down. He does, and my boyfriend tells him something along the lines of, "Hey man, you need to get out of here." This is where the scariest thing happens. The dude had responded to him in a totally different language, mumbling and acting like he didn't even speak any English. My boyfriend then said something like, "I know you speak English, bro. You've been talking to my girlfriend all night, and you need to get out of here." Dude continued to ramble in a different language until my boyfriend raised his voice and basically said, "You have 15 seconds before I pull you out of this car and you never leave this parking lot." For the guy to finally put the car in drive and speed off. I was on edge for weeks after this interaction and even considered switching jobs. Why was he still in the parking lot that long after closing and hours after cashing out his tab? And why was he cleaning out his back seat? I just don't know, but it was definitely very creepy and weird. I read a post earlier tonight that reminded me of this not so fun moment that happened last year. At the time, I, a 24-year-old female, had the entire lower floor unit that I lived in to myself. I used to bartend and manage a nightclub a few blocks away, and would usually get home around 4 a.m. This night, I had just finished a 12-hour shift, was exhausted and hungry, so I decided to order some food. I place the order, get my joint rolled and ready for when the food arrives, put on a movie, and wait. Eventually, I hear the doorbell ring. And being alone and it being late at night, I waited to get the photo sent to the delivery app to verify my food was at the door, and so that I didn't have to make small talk with the driver, as post-COVID I still kept the option for contactless delivery. 3 to 5 minutes pass. I see the photo of my food on the doorstep and decide to get up and go get it. My bedroom window had 5 large windows that gave my full view of the path along the house, the main street in front, our garbage area, and the area right in front of our unit's door. The driver's still out there, and now he's texting me to come out and get my food. I tell him that he left it in a perfect spot. I'll be out shortly to get it, and thanks for delivering it. At this point, I'm waiting for him to go because even though marijuana is legal here, people can still be judgmental, and I don't want to go out in my PJs to collect my food, smoke, and see a human after working all night. He doesn't leave. He keeps texting me to come outside, and now I can hear him talking to another male voice, although my window view obscures anyone else that might be out there. The food in the photo was right against my door, and I can see him edging it away and off to the side, so I'd have to fully step out and around a small corner to collect it. I keep texting him telling him that it's in a perfect spot, that I'm glad he followed the instructions. I'll be out shortly. He starts banging on my front door, still occasionally talking to this other male voice. My food is now further away from the door, and he won't stop banging and telling me to come outside. Eventually, I tell him that I set the delivery as a no contact as I have COVID. I lied. After I saw that he had read my message on the app, he put my food bag by the front door and walked out of there through the parking lot. Initially, he'd come through the front of the house. Something about this encounter just felt so off. I waited about 15 minutes until I couldn't see anyone or hear anyone, and then quickly opened the door and grabbed my food. The whole ordeal lasted about an hour. My food was nice and cold, and my heart was racing for the rest of the night. So yeah, delivery man who couldn't take a hint and go away, and to his friend, please don't come back to my house. So for some background, I'm a 25-year-old girl and I work in a very small, quiet office. We rarely have visitors besides our usual mailman, UPS guy, and FedEx woman. I know them all by name because we get a lot of incoming mail. So the other day we had received a package from UPS, but it wasn't the usual UPS guy. I had never seen this guy before. He dropped off a big box, scanned it, did all of his UPS stuff, and then he held up his phone and snapped a picture of me. He proceeded to smile and say thank you before turning around and leaving. Usually things like that wouldn't get to me, but I was just so creeped out. And when I left to go to lunch, I felt sick because I had such a creeped out feeling in my stomach. My friends said that maybe he was taking a picture of the box as proof that it got to our office or something, but the phone was pointed directly at me, and you could tell with his behavior that it was of me. When our usual UPS guy came in a few days later, who's super nice and normal by the way, I asked him why the hell the other guy would take a picture of me, and I told him that I was super freaked out about it. He said that's the fill-in UPS guy, and that he likes to mess with him by sending him pictures and updates while he's on his usual route. Just an FYI to all you fellas out there, it is not funny to take pictures of a girl that you don't know. I still feel super awkward every time that guy has to fill in for our usual UPS guy. Six years ago, I moved back to my hometown after divorcing my ex-husband. About a year after I moved back, I got a job at a local boutique. My workspace was in the back where the girls took deliveries and the clothes were stored before being put out in the front to sell. Soon after I started working there, I realized all the girls were really creeped out by our local FedEx driver. When the girls saw the truck pull up outside, they'd usually yell, he's here." My boss would literally hide in her office so she didn't have to talk to this guy, and it didn't take me long to figure out why. Now, I'm a very friendly person usually, and I like to treat everyone the way I'd want to be treated. The driver, let's call him Jeff, would come in to drop off the boxes, and he'd always linger. He would make conversation, and his conversations got progressively weird. The first time I met him and introduced myself, he said,
"Oh, did you used to work at the funeral home?"
It was a little strange to me, but it is a small town, so I just said yes and that was it. I hadn't given him my last name, so I just figured he remembered my face. One of the next times he came, he told me that he had just dropped off some packages at my house. When I looked at him and asked how he knew where my house was, he just laughed and said,
"Oh, well, it's not really a big city. I remember names and it doesn't take me long to realize who's who."
It made me feel weird, and when I told my boss about it after he left, she agreed that it was weird, but I kind of just let it go. When my girls told me that the FedEx guy was weird and that he had always tried to talk to them whenever he came by, my warning bells went off. One of the next times he came in, he had made a remark about a big box that he delivered to my house, and he gave me a couple of small packages that were addressed to my house, and then said,
With it being close to Christmas, I didn't want to leave these. I know you don't have a big man to get that box inside. So do you want me to come help you get it in the house when you get off work?
I immediately replied, "No, I got it, but thanks." That remark creeped me out bad. That told me that he was either watching my house or paying attention to the names on the mail. Either way, it was enough for me to warn my girls to not answer if he came to the house and start trying to hide when he came in. One day I even heard him ask one of the girls up front where I was. I started trying to take my lunch break around the time he made his delivery. I did everything I could to avoid him. One evening, I had heard a knock at the door at my house and then the sound of packages being left on the porch. I waited a minute or so and then went to get the boxes. Jeff was parked in the church parking lot across from my house watching. As soon as I came out, he grinned and waved and then started to get out of the truck. I quickly backed into my house and shut the door. He didn't come knock, but his truck was in the parking lot for another 15 minutes or so. My daughter watched him from her bedroom window and told me that he kept looking at the house, and I figured he was just waiting to see if I'd come back out. I called the local FedEx facility to report it. I explained the whole story, and the manager told me they would look into it and thanked me for letting them know. I figured that nothing would be done. A couple of days went by and I got a phone call from a manager at the FedEx facility. He told me that Jeff would no longer be a problem and apologized for everything. I assumed that maybe they had changed his route or something, but the next driver happened to be a high school friend, and when I jokingly told him, "I'm really glad you're my FedEx guy now. That last dude was a creeper," he then told me, "Yeah, that guy got fired. Dude was stalking folks apparently." It made my blood run cold. I watched out for him for months afterwards. It's possible he was just overly friendly, but I don't think so. I used to feel bad that he lost his job, but he just crossed way too many lines. In 2019, I was a delivery driver for a place I won't name. I'd been a delivery driver for a while, and I really loved the job. I'm super extroverted and I love chatting with people, and it was just fun. I also had my fair share of mildly creepy encounters given that I'm a girl and I was delivering in one of the sketchier areas of my city. I never thought much of any of them or saw any real threat. One night in particular stuck with me though. I worked the night shift, so from 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. Around 8 p.m. this night, some guy ordered his food and the delivery was easy enough. His house was kind of creepy. There were no lights on, and when he answered the door, there was a foul smell that immediately hit me. He also didn't say anything. I said my usual, "There's that for you, and could you please fill this out?" The tip thing, by the way. He didn't reply at all or acknowledge me asking him to sign the slip. I didn't think much of it and just headed back to the store. Almost exactly when I arrived back, another order popped up to the same house. He had ordered the exact same thing. I was confused but still not too worried, and I took the delivery and had the same experience. No lights on, smelled really bad, and he didn't say a word. I headed back to the store feeling pretty uncomfortable, but again didn't think too much of it. I started to get extremely uncomfortable when I arrived back to the store and another identical order was up. My manager at the time didn't understand the creepiness of the whole thing, and he insisted I take it. Despite my reluctance, I took it. This time when he opened the door, I told him, "You can order more than one sandwich at a time, you know," as a sort of attempt at humor. He didn't say anything and just closed the door. I was thoroughly creeped out, and I did a sort of sprint back to my car. When I looked back at the house, I noticed the light was on, and I saw someone standing in the window. I couldn't make out any features, but I just assumed it was him. In the end, I still don't know who was standing in the window or why. My manager called me from the store before I was even able to start my car to inform me that another identical delivery had popped up, and he directed me to leave as quickly as I could because he was starting to see the danger of the situation. As the call ended, I had saw the man running up to my car. I couldn't move for a second because I was in shock. He was yelling something that I couldn't understand, and I sped away as fast as possible given that I was shaking like a leaf. We blacklisted him that night after he'd made several attempts to call the store. I still have no idea what his endgame was. My wife always tells me that I need to make a book about my encounters. Here's one of her favorites. It still scares the crap out of me. I own a local delivery service. There was a woman named Sue who constantly did odd things upon delivery. She was mid-60s, gray hair, a solid mustache for a woman, and creepy as all hell. She progressively got worse. It started with little odd things. She would say, "Have you ever tried, beef? It's delicious." Then come to the door with her face covered in grease and say, "It's a new face treatment." One of my favorites was me miscounting change at the end of a long day. I realized my mistake and went to correct it. She matter-of-factly stated, "Laser beams to the back of your head make you stupid. Bye-bye," and then slammed the door closed. She once told me, "I once had a party thrown for my many achievements. They turned a basement into a club for me. I go into the basement and there's hundreds of people applauding me. Well, I turn around and Tom Hanks was there. I said, 'Tommy, you get the hell out of here. I don't like you.'" Now, none of these conversations were provocated. She just went off, and you would have to stand there nodding along. It kept getting worse. She started tossing piles of garbage outside her townhouse. She would drop piles of quarters out of her hand, which would roll into the trash pile and tell you to pick it up. I told all of the drivers to refuse and make her get her own money. Then one day, things hit the fan. As I park, I hear her scream, "Who are you?" I knock and tell her the total. She acts like she has money, has her hand closed, and then drops it in my hand. Nothing. I chuckle. She points to the ground, clearly dazed, and says, "Money." There was something round on the ground. Maybe a rock? I state that's not money, and she goes inside saying that her friend will pay me. Confused, I question it, and she walks away with an odd look, saying she will find the money or he will pay. I figure she's odd. Screw it. I'm waiting and waiting. She had closed her glass door, but not the wooden door. I open the door and holler, "Sue? Sue, I need to get going." Nothing. I peek in to see if something's wrong. Nothing. I decide to open the door for whatever stupid reason and go in. I turn to the right and see a couch with her feet sticking out from behind it. I immediately assume Sue has had a heart attack and hurry towards it. As I approach, I hear grunts like an animal, but still only see feet. I round the corner cautiously and I see Sue on her hands and knees digging into the ground like a dog. She was grunting and I saw white spit foaming around her lips. She turned to face me and I ran faster than I've ever ran in my life. I jumped in my car and did about 50 miles per hour out of there. I called the cops to do a wellness check. Never heard anything from it. Checked the papers for her name. Nothing. What still weirds me out is she called twice a day and never called again after that day. It still gives me the freaking chills. So, hey Sue, never call again please. We will not go there and you really haunt my dreams to this day. One night a few months ago, I went door dashing with my boyfriend, and my younger sister tagged along as well. We delivered some food to this really large home that looked basically abandoned and pitch black. We left it at the door, but we all noted that we had thought something felt strange about it. As we're pulling out of the driveway, this older woman, probably 60s, wearing a robe, looks out the window of the door where we left the food, and then comes outside through a different side door and starts walking down the driveway, then motioning for me to come back. So I pulled back up, thinking maybe we had the wrong house or something. She walks over to my car and gets really close, like she's touching my car and driver's side mirror with her body. And mind you, the COVID is really bad in my state, so I definitely didn't feel comfortable with a stranger being this close to me. She has this terrifying look on her face and blank eyes that I just can't seem to forget. She says in a slow, kind of creepy voice, "Aren't you gonna come inside with us?" I was trying to be nice and was just like, "No ma'am, we left your food on the doorstep for you though." She got really insistent about us all coming inside and asked again with a smile. I declined again, and thankfully she took a step back from my car and I was able to quickly back up without running her feet over and then got the hell out of there. She just stood there smiling and staring the whole time that I backed out of that way too long driveway. I have no clue what that was all about, but I always get really hesitant anytime I have to deliver orders for anyone named Melissa now. For the last 2 semesters, I have ordered Uber Eats quite a lot, especially towards the end of the day. One night I was really craving some Burger King, and I hadn't really eaten lunch or dinner that day, so I was really hungry for anything, and the fridge in my dorm was empty. I went ahead and placed an order and waited, and waited, and I waited until it got to around 11 p.m. when the order said it was finally on its way. This is where it gets weird. I checked the profile of the guy that was taking it to me, and he had only done a handful of orders before this, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Now, I would notice after a couple of minutes that he had stopped on a road near my college, and he would open the chat to message me. Here's how the conversation went in the app.
Your food is cold, sir. I'm 1.5 miles away from the nearest Burger King. Which one did you order it from? What street and what number?
It's fine, dude. Just bring me my food.
Well, what did you order? I'm gonna go get it right now.
Just bring me what you have. It's fine. You're not that far away from me.
I don't have your food. I have to go get it.
What do you mean? You literally just said that my food is cold. Look, man, I don't have time for this right now. It's late. I really don't know why you said you were coming with the food if you're just now telling me that you don't even have it.
I got out of the car and it fell out and I stepped all over it. I don't know how else to tell you. It's on me, but it's 1.5 miles away to the Burger King. I'm just gonna need to be able to find you.
Alright, fine, whatever, man. It should say my order though in the details.
What would you like, sir?
It should say that in my order summary.
I can see that the delivery person is on the way to your drop-off location. However, it shows here as well that this order is already late. At this point, I can offer you 2 options. If you'd like to cancel, we can do so free of charge, or I can offer you 20% of your order subtotal amounting to $269 Uber cash. That's if you're willing to wait or keep the order. Let me know what you prefer and I can take care of this for you.
Now, in that conversation, I realized that I said a lot of weird things, but I didn't care at the time because I was just so hungry and I just wanted to eat, even if it was cold. But the fact that he changed his story was very weird to me. After waiting a bit longer to see if he would keep his word and go back to get me my food, I was shocked to see that he continued going to my dorm. Once he got there, I stepped outside to see him pull up in his car. To summarize, he told me that he had bad news and that he didn't have my food and that he had something else for me. This was when my instinct kicked in, and I got my key card ready to go back inside, since all the outside doors on my dorm building automatically lock. He would go to his car and pull out a plastic box of chicken, and he said it was mine to have. I declined and started to go back inside, and he would continue to make remarks about how he knows how I'm feeling and how he was hungry in college too, all while walking towards me. I was having none of it, and I told him that I would be canceling the order and getting my money back. Ever since then, I've never ordered Uber Eats late at night, and I can only imagine what his true intentions were. One thing that confused me about this is what actually happened to my order. At first, he said he was on his way to get it, despite Uber Eats saying he already had the order and was on his way. After a bit, he then changed it to the order being cold, and that he was going to go get it again for me. Finally, he would say that he dropped it. Now, I think what really happened is that he ate the order, which could have led to malicious intentions with his box of chicken. I also want to say that Uber Eats is a really great service, and I've never really been unsatisfied with it except for this one time. I've always tipped accordingly and have really enjoyed the brief interactions with the people that bring my orders. This guy was just really weird. I'm a female who lives in an apartment complex. This evening after dark, I went downstairs to meet a delivery driver out front of the complex. I went out via our patio gate to get to the front. When I came back the same way to go back inside, I had noticed a man, white, maybe late 30s, holding a bottle of wine and a bottle opener. He was standing inside the gate by the door's entrance watching me pretty intently. It struck me as strange right away when I noticed. I had just come out of that very same door 5 to 8 minutes ago and hadn't seen him. There was another group of people talking and eating nearby on the other side of the patio. As I approached the door to go inside, he walked towards me smiling while gesturing with the wine and bottle opener, and then said, "Please tell me you live upstairs." Something about his tone and smile seemed off, like he was lying and trying to be smooth. The way he spoke and walked towards me while stretching out his hands with the wine and bottle opener seemed very performative and theatric. The hair on my neck and arm stood up. I said, "Sorry, I don't live here. I'm visiting." He said he lived here and forgot his key. I led him in the door to the lobby area, and I told him the concierge at the front of the lobby could help him. He looked forlorn/sullen, yet subtly annoyed all at once, and then slowly came through the door and started towards the concierge. The front entrance where the concierge sits does not require your key to enter. When residents forget their keys, they usually go straight to the concierge via the front entrance and/or call a roommate, neighbor, or the emergency maintenance line. A resident would have to get a new key right away to be able to get upstairs and get back into their apartment without a roommate. If he was visiting a resident, they would have given him their key to get back up, or they would let him up. He would have called them or used the concierge desk phone in the lobby to call them. The concierge also has the residents' phone numbers. I didn't want to be paranoid, but my instinct screamed that he was not a resident and not invited by a resident. I think he wanted me to let him on the elevator with me so he could have access to someone's floor. My roommate was pretty creeped out when I told her what happened. She said that it kind of reminded her of something Ted Bundy would do. She thought that he sounded like he was trying to charmingly guilt me into letting him on the elevator to either gain access to someone, or worst case scenario, do something sinister to me. Whatever his intent, his tone and demeanor creeped me out. This happened back in December, about a week before Christmas. I'm a 32-year-old guy and a 9-year veteran of the Navy currently using my GI Bill to go to college in Idaho. I'm so busy with school and work, so I don't really have time to go out and socialize very often, so I have to rely on a lot of the apps to go on dates. I matched with this really cute girl right around my age. We had a good conversation, and then we had scheduled a date. I was at a bar/restaurant not too far for either of us to drive, so it was really perfect. She was very pretty in person, and we got along great. During our conversation, I found out that she worked in a non-cop role at the police station, like a receptionist essentially. I also learned she had a roommate, whom she said was out of town for the holidays. She added that she hated being alone because she had a crazy ex-boyfriend who stalked her. I was a little uneasy at that, and I told her as much, and she said that he's harmless, so I kinda let it go. We had a few more drinks and were there about another hour, and at her suggestion, she said we should go back to her place. And I mean, I wasn't going to argue it. She was hot after all. She then insisted on driving. I told her I was fine, and she said no, that I had been drinking and she saw way too many DUIs at her job. I got what she was saying, but I only had 2 gin and tonics, and I was fine. But again, she insisted. I thought it was weird, but I didn't really care. We went to her house and she walked up and just opened the door. She didn't unlock it. It was already open, which I found very odd because she said that she had a stalker and that her roommate was gone. She started feeding her cat, and as she was doing that, I saw a bowl of cereal on the kitchen counter. I touched it and it was still cold, like it hadn't even been sitting there for a while. The cereal wasn't soggy either. I could clearly see that it was Frosted Flakes. The cereal hadn't even been sitting there long enough for the milk to take the frosting off, so I knew that it wasn't old. I asked her who it was and she had hesitated. She said that she had ate it as a snack before heading to the bar. It just didn't make any sense. and before I could say anything, she just kissed me and put her arms around me very seductively, and then said for me to take her to her room. Again, she was pretty hot, and I quit caring all about the cereal. Well, we had started fooling around, and I went to close the curtains, and she told me to leave them open. A few minutes later, maybe 5, we were in bed, and my back was to the window, and she let out a huge gasp. A scared gasp. Her eyes were at the window, and I turned around and I saw someone in a hoodie and they took off. I heard the steps running on her back deck. I immediately jumped up and ran out to make sure that her doors were locked. And of course, the front door wasn't. I ran to it and locked it, and right when I did, the door started banging. I went to open it because I was going to mess the dude up, or at least try to, and she told me to just go back to bed with her. I screamed at her and I asked if she was insane, and she told me that he does this and that he usually goes away. I asked her, "You know for sure this is your ex?" And she said, "Yeah, don't worry about it." At this point, he had started banging on the side of her house on the other end, and she didn't even seem at all scared and just kept trying to get me to go back to her bed. I didn't want to call the cops because for all I know, this dude is a cop, or she'd know the cops that showed up and would take her side. I also couldn't just leave because my car was at the bar, and I was terrified. I had an adrenaline rush that was so intense it gave me that metallic taste in my mouth and it made my stomach hurt. I felt stuck and slim on options. All I knew was that I didn't trust her at all. At this point, I had started calling her out for the door not being locked, the cereal, and I openly called her a liar. She couldn't come up with any logical answers, and I had no idea what I was into. She just kept telling me to calm down, and again said to just go back to bed with her. The banging was pulsating. Her ex would bang on one part of the house, it would stop, and then it would be at a different part of the house. I shouldn't have done this, but my fight or flight was pretty much kicked in, and I told her, "If this is a robbery or some kind of setup, I promise I'll kill you both." Now, I'm not a hard ass or anything, but my fear had told me to let her know that no matter what it was, they'd have a fight on their hands. I ordered an Uber off my phone when she wasn't looking, and I didn't tell her. I just kept arguing with her and asking her what was going on, hoping to just keep her talking and in the room. I stayed right next to the door so I could leave ASAP. Luckily, I never got my pants off, and my jacket and shoes were right by the door, so I was able to get dressed. The Uber showed up pretty quickly, thankfully, but the banging was on the front part of the house by the front window, not 10 feet from the door. Without even saying anything, I just opened her door and ran out as fast as I could. I saw the person running around the house and just kept running to the car. I got in and I looked back at the door and my date was just standing there. It's been a little over a month, but I honestly have no idea what the hell I got myself into. I really don't believe the story of just a girl with a crazy ex based off of the factors I've told you. It feels like either a robbery or some kind of weird fetish cuck type thing, or even worse, a trap to murder someone. I don't know. Definitely something I'm very mad at myself for. I mean, I'm a 9-year Navy vet and I allowed myself to get into a crazy situation like that. I reported her account in the Uber ride back to the bar, and I told the bartenders as well, just in case they ever saw her in there again. So back in June 2022, I met a man on Hinge. I'm from Victoria, Australia. He was from Queensland but was working in Victoria and was 28 at the time. I was 24. We hit it off, and within a day of chatting, he had asked to meet me in the city for drinks. He seemed friendly and cute, so why not get dressed up and give him a chance, I thought. Funnily enough, my spidey senses were tingling already. But I just thought it was the usual nerves of a first date. I should have trusted my gut, but he hadn't given me any red flags yet. He met me at Flinders Street Station. My first impression was that he dressed really nice, had a suit and a long coat. He clearly took pride in his looks. Instantly, he was super affectionate, way more than I'm used to. He kissed my cheek, picked me up, squeezed the crap out of me, and we were hand in hand from the get-go. Although I was taken aback, he was of Brazilian descent, and I know their culture can be quite forward. I wasn't overly alarmed, but this was within 10 seconds of meeting. So we decided to go for drinks, and he recommended a very well-known fancy bar. I'm a nurse, so way above my pay grade, but he said he would like to cover the whole night. It becomes apparent very quickly that he's super chivalrous, charming, and a sweet talker. It felt like a soppy 2000s rom-com, I can't lie. He was super open about his life, and because he was, so was I. We had so much in common, and everything just felt right. It makes me want to gag now that I know the real him. If it feels too good to be true, well, it probably is. Basically, the life story that he threw up all over me was that he was born in Brazil. His parents had a family business and were well off but lost it somehow. I think he said his dad died. Rest in peace, Dad. His mom couldn't afford to care for him and his 4 sisters alone, so she gave him up for adoption and he moved to Portugal. I guess he was the runt of the litter because she kept the 4 girls. So he grew up in Portugal from about 5 until he was 17, when he decided to move back to his biological mother. He said that his Portuguese family were lovely but incredibly religious, and he didn't like the constraints, arranged marriage, no boinking before marriage type deal. So at 17, he moved back to Brazil and built his relationship with his biological mother, and eventually he had decided to move to Australia. He moved over to study some aerodynamic bullcrap degree for some career I don't give a flying crap about. Fast forward 11 years to 2022, and now he works in Queensland as some manager for shipping companies and flies to and from Melbourne for work every few weeks. Now that you're up to speed with that crock of crap, let's get back to the date. I had a traumatic upbringing, neglect, poverty, raised by my grandparents, and so on. So hearing all that really touched me. The man had me in the palm of his slimy hands. I felt at times that he was cocky and had an ego on him, but he even mentioned that he can come across as cocky, and he reassured me that's just how some people perceive him, but he's not like that at all. So clearly someone's pulled him up for being an arrogant twat before. The date is progressing, and he was really ticking so many boxes. We spoke about how I love to dance and always wanted to learn salsa, so he suggested a studio that does weekend night classes, but it had sold out. So he asked if I'd go back to his place just to hang out. Yeah, I don't know what this man put in my drink, but my common sense was just gone. I told him that I needed to go home before midnight, and I was only coming over to talk. Anyway, we get to his apartment, and like the scene from Crazy Stupid Love, he actually lights candles. He also puts on salsa music, pours a heavy glass of red for us, and he asked if he can teach me how to salsa in his tiny living room. Like, was I really Kate Hudson in How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days? I obliged because my fanny flutters are in full control of my functioning at this point. We end up making out and, well, things get hot and heavy, but I stuck to my guns and I didn't let him pass my chastity belt. Don't get me wrong, I've had one-night stands before, but I had turned a new leaf, and my rule was now 3 dates minimum. Long story short, but not very short at all, we ended up falling asleep together and I was fully clothed. How about that? We woke up the next morning and he took me out for breakfast before ordering me an Uber home. Keep in mind, that was the one and only time that I physically met him, and it was PG rated. A few days later, things were getting weird. He started making grandiose gestures and love bombing. Without even asking, he bought me lingerie. He didn't know my size and had never seen me in lingerie. He bought me jewelry for my birthday just 1 week after we met, and then the grand prize, an all-inclusive holiday to Queensland. I said yes because YOLO, right? Like literally I might die, but at least my tombstone would say I was living my best life. He told me on the trip we'd go to a private restaurant that his friend owns, a helicopter ride, as well as a cruise on a yacht, amongst a bunch of other completely insane things. He paid for the flights and he told me not to bring lingerie because he had that covered. My red flag alarms were totally going off at this point. Like, is he a sugar daddy or am I about to be trafficked in the lingerie and jewelry that he just bought me? Think about it. Dude works for a shipping company. Perfect way to ship me off to the market. So at this point, my stomach is turning and I'm getting sus, which means suspicious for those who don't know. I realized that I hadn't really done much digging on him, And if I was going interstate with this schmoozy wet sock, I needed to know everything. I spent hours with my housemate investigating. His Facebook was on total lockdown, and his Instagram had no signs of family. He barely had any tagged photos with people, and the photos he did have were from years ago in Brazil. All of the photos he did have were just solo and him traveling. So I had started questioning everything. Was his name even what he said it was? It doesn't sound very Brazilian or Portuguese. Sounds more like Donald Duck or Chuck E. Cheese to me. So we searched his number on my bank app using PayID. Lo and behold, a completely different name comes up. I'm crapping bricks now. Like, who the hell is this that I've been wasting my time with? So I go deeper. I'm going through all of his Instagram followers looking for any sign of him. I found a mutual in the deep dark cave that I've got myself into. And there it is. A group photo of him from around 2016 holding a Brazilian woman that looks about 35. And the comments mention, "Love you both, can't wait to see you again." I couldn't confirm if they were married, but that's where my money was. I dig more and more to find out who she is. I can't really find anything, but I had a lead on what her name might be, so I head to Google and search both his name and hers. After sifting through countless pages I can't read because they're in Spanish and also poorly translated, well, I found a settlement document. It was a civil dispute about a debt, but both of their full names were there. To my delight, his full name in the case was what was claimed, but one truth doesn't fix a truck of lies. So now I'm thinking that I've gone mad and overthinking. Maybe he's just divorced and doesn't post a lot. Whilst doing our investigations, I had asked him to send his passport so my friends had his details when I went to Queensland just to be safe. He sent me his passport after hours of waiting, and he had blacked out info and covered his face. The idiot didn't cover his date of birth well enough though, because would you look at that? This absolute toad was born in 1986, making him 36. Now I saw through his bullcrap, but I wanted to flip the game for a little while. I had to do it for the plot. I confronted him all about it, and he made up some crap about how when he was registered in Portugal, they stuffed up the date. I didn't know a 5-year-old could look 13, but there you have it. Over the next few weeks, he kept canceling and changing Queensland's plans days before each rescheduled flight. There was always another issue. I went along with it. I had no intention of going, but I wanted to see his cunning plot come to fruition. Maybe it wasn't trafficking. Maybe he was going to magically lose all of his money and get cancer and need my help to survive. And then I got a message that broke the camel's back. His grandma in Portugal was sick, so he had to fly there ASAP. I literally laughed when I read that. I was super short and apathetic with him. Well, next day, Grandma died of a stroke, of course. Boo-hoo. Some may think my digging went a bit too far at this point, but I ended up messaging the woman from the Instagram photo and legal document because I just had a horrible gut feeling that there was more to all of this, and I was just so sick of the games. It definitely felt like I was crossing a line, but I had to know. She ended up messaging me back that she unfortunately did know him and wanted to tell me everything over the phone. What she told me blew my freaking mind. Excuse my language, but this piece of crap human was the biggest narcissistic, pathological, lying, cheating scumbag I had ever had the displeasure of knowing. He had lied about it all. He was 36, born and raised by his mom and dad in Brazil his entire life. He had brothers, not 4 sisters. Grandma was still alive and kicking. He studied social work and was now studying to become a physiotherapist. Nothing at all to do with era whatever the crap. I don't even know what the shipping container place had to do with any of it, but he had sent me Insta stories of him working there, so that's scary. He was the same charming suave man to his ex-wife, who he married in Brazil, and they moved to Queensland shortly after. As soon as they arrived, he became financially and emotionally abusive to her, and he refused to get a job. She worked and paid for the bills, his social work degree, random business trips, and really whatever else the scumbag pretended he did. After being in Queensland for 5 years, she got a message from a 24-year-old Australian girl, same age I was at the time, and it turned out they'd been dating for 3 years. They'd met at university and he'd been using her to do all his university work. She was told the same life story as me, but the poor thing never even once questioned it. She believed the crap about his age too. She realized through a mutual university friend that saw a photo of him and said that she thought he was married, and thank God for that friend. So he and his wife get divorced and the 24-year-old kicks him to the curb, but only a year later another girl reaches out to his now ex-wife. Same story. 24-year-old Australian girl told the same bullcrap life story and believed it. They'd been together for 4 years and he was using her to pay for his lifestyle and clothes. Well, 2 years go by, his ex-wife just hoped that he had finally come to his senses, but afraid not. I was the third girl in question to reach out to her. My guess is he still got a few girls on the go at a time. His plans probably kept changing because of them, and one of them probably pays for his plane trips every few weeks. The holiday jewelry and lingerie was probably some of the other woman's hard-earned money as well. Needless to say, I was furious. I ended up ghosting him because that was the best way to piss off a narcissist. He messaged me for weeks on text, Insta, WhatsApp, and Facebook. Well, eventually, I decided to give him a taste of his own medicine. I told him that I knew some things and he needed to come clean. I never mentioned what or how I knew, but he said he'd be fully transparent, and he flew down to Melbourne to see me. He probably thought I knew just 1% of the truth. I thought about actually seeing him and seeing what bullcrap he'd come up with next, but I was done at this point. I told him I was about 5 hours away from the city in a town that's so small there's only one train to get there a day. I said that I couldn't pick him up from the airport, but he could stay a few days. I'd show him the real Australian country, and I'd drive him back to the airport at the end of his visit. So after sitting on a 2.5-hour flight and sitting on a train for 5 hours to go to the middle of nowhere, I asked him to send a photo of where he was so I could find him. He'd actually done it. I was at home in my pajamas watching a movie, and he was at a train station in the rain freaking 5 hours away from the airport and stuck until the next day. This was pure gold. I can only imagine how pissed off he would have been. I had a message that I already had ready and written out, and I was waiting for that exact moment. I waited for a reply so I knew he got it. Then I blocked that piece of crap on everything, and I never looked back. So yeah, there you go. Stay safe out there, ladies, and always trust your instincts. Years ago, I had posted this same story on a Melbourne forum, and unfortunately, there were a lot of other girls that had met him online or for a date, but thankfully, they all got the same vibes as me before it went too far. However, I was the only one crazy enough to find out who the scumbag really was. I just really hope he hasn't been able to trick any more women since my run-in with him, and if they have been, I really hope they found out the truth. I went on a Tinder date some time ago while I was adjusting to a new city that I had moved to. I didn't really know anybody there, so I used some online dating apps to see the dating scene around town. I landed one from a girl that seemed just like an artsy hippie type of girl. We had a few exchanges through the Tinder app and then decided to meet up for a drink. I picked her up at her house and she had greeted me at the door and gave me a hug. She said the name of a local bar that she wanted to go to for us to chat and also get to know each other. I told her I would drive and proceeded to my car. The first red flag I noticed was when I had walked to my car and opened the door, she had just followed me to the driver's side and was just standing behind me staring. I looked at her blankly for about 15 seconds and I asked her if she was going to get in. She just said, "Sure, I'd love to," and then went the long way to the passenger side around the back of the car. Since I had just met this girl, I figured that she had just maybe smoked some weed or something, as I had kind of got the vibe she was a bit of a stoner. As I was driving to the bar, she then talked in a very low voice, almost as if she was trying to whisper. I'm not hard of hearing or anything, but I had to ask her to repeat herself several times just so I could make out the full sentences of what she was saying. When we got to the bar, I made sure that we got a seat closer to the back away from most of the people, just so I could have a little quiet in order to hear her. The conversations honestly carried on as normal from this point, and it was actually a fun time for the time being. We talked about different things that we were interested in, and she did bring up that she did recreationally use weed and a few other tripping substances, like shrooms and such. I'm not much of a fan of these, but it at least made me relax in the back of my mind to think that maybe she was just high off marijuana and that rationally explains some of the out there behavior. Granted, I had a few drinks at this point myself, so I was honestly not thinking very straight. I asked her if she wanted to go back to my place after the drinks, and she agreed. When we got to my place, we had a few more drinks. Then she had started talking about her jewelry. This is where it gets weird. She told me that her jewelry was her big secret, and it defined her. When I asked her why it was so important, she said, "I'm actually Anastasia, and I was never killed in Russia. My jewelry is my link to my past." It was hard for me to take that seriously at this point with how much I drank, so I kind of challenged that statement using the little bit that I knew about history. At this point, she freaked out and started yelling at the top of her lungs about how I don't respect ancestors and history. Then she got quiet and tiptoed right up to me and then grabbed me by the neck. She then brought my face eye to eye with hers while still holding on to my neck. She then says at this point, "I'm a shaman, and I will curse you. My ancestors have destroyed many people, and you do not respect that. You are from oppressive ancestors, and they will be punished." She then put her hand in a whiskey glass and made a cross on my face and then kissed my forehead. At this point, I had started to sober up a little. I talked her into calming down, telling her I was only joking. She then slowly started getting back to normal. Then she had started talking about her cat fetish. She told me that she has a list of people who she tames to act as cats. I'm not judging people on their fetishes, so I listen in. She then tells me all the things she does to them and starts acting like a cat in my living room. If she hadn't yelled at me earlier on, I might have almost been turned on by it. My red flags in my head were tingling like crazy at this point, so I just listened and tried not to set her off. She noticed sage on my kitchen counter, and she asked me to let her light it and bless the house. Side note, I use sage just to make my house smell better occasionally. It's kind of like a ritual I like to do, but it's mine and my own, something I take very personally and like to do myself. I tell her no, she can't light it, and that it's my own thing that I like to do. Then she freaks out, telling me I'm a horrible human being and then screaming all over the place. I tell her that I can take her home now, and she runs to the door and goes outside. As I get outside, she's now screaming at the top of her lungs that I'm a horrible person and I should go die. I then tell her she can walk herself home then, and I go back to my place and lock the door. She then started banging on the door hard in about 10 minutes, saying that she left her phone in there. I grab her phone on the kitchen counter and open the door to hand it to her. She tries to barge inside, and I block her with my forearm. She then acts like she's about to punch me. I just hold my ground and tell her she's not coming in. She then screams that she wanted my whiskey bottle we were drinking from. I then told her, "Hell no, I'm the one who bought it, because I'm the one who paid for the damn thing." I then slam the door at that point and just lock it. I heard her bang on the door for about a minute. Then I heard her footsteps going down the stairs. I waited about an hour. Then I went walking outside to see if she was still hanging around. I didn't see her, nor did I ever see her again after that. I know that this is probably not the scariest encounter ever, but it was a crazy one. And for the next few nights, I was really creeped out, always walking around the area I lived just to make sure she wasn't hanging around. I honestly hope she's okay wherever she is now. But yeah, I have zero intentions on ever seeing her again. I was sent to Korea from my university a few years ago. They told me for my major I had to go somewhere in Asia, and my friend had really talked up Korea for me. I knew nothing about it, but decided what the hell, and then I embarked on a semester-long trip. I had only had one serious boyfriend in my life, who I had broken up with a few months prior. I also don't really enjoy one-night stands, and I wasn't digging the dudes in the clubs in Seoul, but I did still want to have some sort of romantic experience, I suppose. So my friend recommended that I use this dating app to meet English-speaking Koreans. That way I could meet someone and experience the actual dating culture. I thought, I'm young, so why not? I was just so eager to have new experiences. Maybe it sounds dumb to try dating in a foreign country, but it worked out for me eventually. just not the first date. I met him on a dating app after being in Seoul for about 3 weeks. Let's call him Tim. I still didn't know the culture or city very well and was a bit naive about everything. He eagerly wanted me to meet for a date after talking to me, and he seemed nice. I really should have asked more questions, and I should have noticed that he wasn't giving me many details about himself. Tim was a guy a bit older than me, but claimed he was a college student. I assumed that he had done his military time and had returned to school. All men in Korea have to do military time, by the way. We talked for a bit and decided to meet for a tea date near the school that I went to. He wanted to come to my dorm originally to pick me up, but I live in an all-women's dorm, and I didn't want him to know exactly where I lived since we were still strangers. So instead, I insisted that we meet at the main town center near the subway. He really didn't like this idea, which looking back was a red flag, but eventually I insisted. The night of the date, I had waited an hour for this guy. He was very late. Tim weirdly claimed that he just wanted to make me wait. I thought he was kidding and I messaged him with a laughing emoji, assuming he was just lost. When he finally arrived, he was much smaller than I thought, but a man's height has never really been something I care about that much. He was also quite thin. Maybe I let my guard down because I didn't really see him as physically threatening to me, which was a mistake in the end. Right off the bat, he was way too touchy with me and breathed really creepy and heavy. I was so off-put with his demeanor. I'm usually very tolerant with different personality types, but this was very odd to me. I'd been told that Korean men would be polite and not so touchy on the first date. He was also dressed oddly like in business attire for a date, but I thought that maybe it's just a Korean thing. Again, I was dumb and I knew jack crap about the culture. Then the first thing he said to me was, "You're not as white as I thought you were." I thought this was a translation error, but his English was near perfect. So I asked for clarification, and he said what he meant. "Well, I thought you would be more white. Your skin is darker than I thought, and your eyes aren't as green. Are you really pure European?" Now I was officially weirded out. First of all, I'm pretty much as white as you can get. I'm Irish and Scandinavian, so white as hell basically. So the fact that he thought that I could have possibly been any whiter was funny. And why did he care in the first place anyway? Why does my skin color matter to this guy? And why is he bringing it up? He said about 3 times on the date how he wished I had greener eyes, and every time I would just reply back, "Well, maybe my online photos make me look brighter," and brushed it off as him just being nervous and trying to start a conversation. Isn't it really funny the dumb excuses you make for people when you're panicked? When we arrived at the tea place, I had tried to order a basic raspberry tea, and he stopped me and he told me I had to have this special tea instead. I thought it was weird that he wanted to choose my tea for me, but in my head I just brushed it off once again. He really insisted that I drink only this type of tea, and I just agreed. These small details become weirder later. After the tea, he had asked if we could look around my school. It was dark, but the school was very well lit, so I agreed. The whole time we walked around, he would randomly stop and grab me for long hugs. At first, I let it happen, but then I stopped him, but he just kept trying. He kept grabbing me and breathing really hard into my neck. It was so awkward. He also wouldn't tell me any personal details about himself. I asked so many questions, desperately trying to distract from all the awkward grabbing and to try and get to know him, but he would never tell me anything. He actually even said at one point, "I'm a mysterious man," like a movie line or something. He also said something like, "You look so much like my favorite movie character," and I asked who, but he said that I would have to figure it out on my own. Finally, he said, "I want to go to a dark area," and in my head I screamed hell no. At this point, I just wanted the date to be over so fast. He somehow knew there was a wooded area behind my campus, and he said we should go there. I said no and that I wanted to stay near the main campus in town, but he kept pushing. Finally, he actually grabbed my arm and started dragging me there. He said, "I can't let anyone see," and I started to panic. I finally ripped my arm away and just demanded we leave and go back to the main road immediately. Looking back, I don't know why I didn't ask for help or get angry. Maybe I was scared. But I just began to book it back to the main road and he followed. We ended up in front of a hospital near the center of town and I told him it was time for him to go. I made some excuse and he was pleading with me to stay. I told him we could meet the next day and I would message him. Of course I lied. I just wanted to get away from him at this point. I was pretending it was all okay just so he would leave. Suddenly, I think he's leaning in to kiss me, and I immediately think, oh God, no. But it was so much worse. Instead, I actually feel pain in my face. It takes me a second to realize that he was biting my face. It was like a dog. I had never felt this sensation before. He leaned his head sideways and he bit me on my nose and cheek as hard as he could. I screamed and pushed him away from me. His face looked so freaky, and I barely had any time to react in words. Instead, I ran up the sidewalk until I saw a convenience store on the right. I ran to the back of the store and just bent down to start crying. The man who owned the store had started to yell at me, but I couldn't explain my situation. I just begged him in English to let me stay. I ended up having to buy a popsicle to stick around. God, I really wished I had learned some Korean by then. I guess Tim didn't follow me. I peered outside the store and I didn't see him. I texted a friend and waited for them to get me to take me back to my dorm. On the way back, I had messaged Tim and I basically told him to stay the hell away from me. I told him he was a creep, that he shouldn't be biting women, and something along the lines of calling the police. Then I blocked him. I was actually so scared to walk around my school area after that. I was afraid that he would find me somehow. I'm so thankful that I never let him pick me up at my dorm. I called my mom to tell her what happened when suddenly she said, "Wait, what did he ask you?" She then put some details together, and she realized that all of these weird things had to do with the 50 Shades of Grey books. At first, I thought she was just being silly and overthinking a bad date. I thought she was joking. But oh God, was she right. She had recently seen the movie or read the book of something and knew all of the details. The eye color and the way he dressed, the tea he made me drink, and the random lines he said. It all matches the books and movies. It was all for his dirty little fantasy. My mom thinks that he picked me because I looked like the girl in the movie. It explains why he was so fixated on my appearance and his whole thing with biting and trying to dominate me. Even if it wasn't his intention, I later learned that there really are some creeps who seek out foreign girls to dominate and have sex with like a prize. They call it riding the white horse or something along those lines. On a happier note, this bad experience didn't stop me. I eventually met someone else in Korea and we ended up falling in love. We even did the whole long distance thing, and I'm now living in Korea studying and working. We're hoping to get married soon. So I guess I didn't let bad creepy guys stop my life. So my family owns a cabin on a small lake up in New Hampshire. We go there every summer. It's basically our home away from home. There are other houses on the lake, quite a few near us, but beyond that, it's a pretty rural area. Miles of woods stretch beyond the lake houses, so there's literally no reason to be in the area unless you were hunting on a lake house or were visiting the lake for whatever reason. So one night, maybe 6 years ago, it was late, probably around midnight. My ex and I were laying in bed just chatting about whatever. All of a sudden, we hear footsteps outside the open window. The window lays only about halfway up on the wall to the side of the bed, and is situated so that it opens right at the bottom of the bed where our feet are. The ground around my house is covered in a layer of pine needles that drop from above, so it's pretty hard to walk quietly. But the footsteps sounded like whatever was making them was trying their best not to be heard. They sounded relatively close, but we rationalized to ourselves that they were probably made from some sort of animal. A couple of minutes go by, and we hear them again, except this time they seemed closer. They seemed to be right outside the window, still trying to move quietly. At this point, the two of us are starting to get a little freaked out. To our mutual horror, We look down and see a hand slowly coming through the window. Obviously, we scream and wake the house up, and my parents come running out of their adjacent room. We tell them what happened, and of course, my father rationalizes it as the event being a figment of our imaginations. To this day, I still don't know if he's right or not. The weird thing is that both my ex and I saw the same thing, so how could it be our imaginations? To this day, I feel uneasy staying in that room, and I always make sure to shut the windows before I go to bed. A few years back, my girlfriend and I, having hiked several other parts of the Appalachian Trail, decided we wanted to give the southern portion of Virginia's trail a shot. It is about 166 miles long and runs through George Washington and Jefferson National Forest from Roanoke County to Pearisburg and Giles County. This is definitely one of the more remote and less traveled parts of the trail, which is exactly what we were looking for. We gathered our gear and made our way to the start of the Virginia Creeper Trail to begin our journey. We had planned our journey to end at Damascus and figured that by the time we got there, we would be more than ready to get home to our own beds. It was early October, and the changing of the leaves and colors were amazing. The air was crisp and cool. Perfect hiking weather with beautiful scenery. The majority of the trip was pretty uneventful. Just your typical hike. But our last couple of nights is where things got weird. On this portion of the trail, you're supposed to camp on the trail or a designated shelter. We didn't really want to run into other people and didn't want anyone coming up on us in the middle of the night. We decided to ignore those suggestions and find our own little spot off the trail. A little searching around and we found a spot a little ways off the trail in the middle of a small clearing. It was perfect. We set up camp, cooked some food, talked for a while, and then snuggled up and went to sleep for the night. Somewhere around 2 a.m., I was awoken by my girlfriend shaking me awake and telling me, "Get your gun! Someone's outside walking around our tent." She informed me that she woke up to what sounded like someone right outside the tent running a knife or something along the side while circling us. Whenever hiking, I carry a 1911 and a judge with me. You never know exactly who or what you might run into when on such a long hike in a remote location. I got the judge out of my backpack, and then we sat silently listening for any sounds. A few minutes of nothing but the breeze blowing through the trees. I heard crunching sounds. Someone or something was walking in the woods behind our tent. I got the flashlight and silently made my way out of the tent. Our fire had gone out, so it was nearly pitch black, illuminated by only the dim glow of the October moon. I told my girlfriend to stay put while I checked it out. I didn't flick the flashlight on right away so as to not give away that I was out of the tent and have it become a shining beacon of my location. Instead, I waited to hear more noises. After a few minutes, I heard more crunches. It sounded like it was bipedal based on the way the steps were paced. I turned on the flashlight and flooded the area with light. I thought I saw someone move behind a tree. I yelled out and told them to go away and that I was armed. I keep the light on the area with my gun drawn and slowly approached towards the area where I thought I saw the figure. Then from my right, I hear what sounds like someone running away through the woods. I spin and face my light that way, and then from the original spot hear who or whatever was there take off into the woods. There's absolutely no way I'm giving chase, so I return to the campsite. I tell my girlfriend about what happened, and I end up sitting guard outside the tent in the darkness until daybreak. In the morning, I looked around a bit for signs of whoever or whatever it was, and I discovered a boot print in some soft moist dirt not too far from our tent. It wasn't mine, and it wasn't my girl's. This freaked me out, as it confirmed that someone, perhaps more than one, was skulking around our tent in the dark. I kept it to myself because I didn't want to freak my girl out any more than she already was. At this point, we were pretty deep in, and we still had 2 days left. That day, we walked a little faster than normal and covered as much ground as possible. When it came time to set up camp, I found a spot near a cliff where we could place the tent in a small overhang and prevent anyone from coming up behind us. The whole day up to this point, I had a feeling we were being followed. I had no confirmation of this as I hadn't seen or heard anyone else, but it was just a gut feeling. We We set up camp and made some food, then retreated to the tent. I gave my girl the 1911, and I kept the judge right next to me, and I assured her that if I slept at all, it would be with one eye open. After a while, she drifted off to sleep, and I stayed awake listening to the sounds of the woods at night. I was awake for a few hours, just waiting to see if anything was going to happen. At some point, I guess my exhaustion caught up with me, and I drifted off. I awoke sometime later to what sounded like someone going through our stuff outside the tent. I grabbed my gun and woke up my girlfriend, shushing her to be quiet. From the faint glow of the fire, I could see someone's silhouette against the tent. There really was someone out there. I yelled at them something along the lines of, "Hey man, we're armed! Get the hell out of here!" They dropped what they were doing and bolted. I came out of the tent, gun drawn and ready to shoot someone. Our stuff was strewn all about. They had rummaged through quite a bit of our stuff. I walked to the edge of the woods in the direction of whoever was out there had fled. There was a creek nearby, and I walked to the edge where there was a small trail running alongside it. Down the creek, I could see a light. It looked like a lantern the way it flickered. Then I saw 3 more emerge from the other side of the woods. I told my girlfriend to start packing up whatever she could, and that we were leaving now. We packed up everything of value, left the tent and a few other items, and headed back onto the trail in the middle of the night. I kept hearing people talking off in the woods and hearing branches snap for quite some ways. I kept looking behind us every few seconds just to make sure nobody was coming up on us. It was completely nerve-wracking. If something happened, we were still a long way from anywhere and quite literally on our own, since we hadn't seen another hiker the entire time we'd been out there. I really felt like we were in serious danger. We had been walking for quite some time when I heard something in the woods behind us. As we rounded a corner, I turned around and saw someone step out into the trail and just stand there watching us. It was just as the sun was coming up and barely any light. I couldn't make out any features, just the silhouette. I stopped and looked at them for a sec, and I asked them who they were and what they wanted. They just stood there silently watching us, and then turned and walked back into the woods. We picked up the pace and kept going, looking back every so often. We didn't see them again, but my gut told me they were still there for quite a ways. We eventually reached the end of the trail and got to where we had parked my girlfriend's car, extremely exhausted. We had made it out of the Virginia woods without becoming a mule for a clan of cannibalistic inbred hillbillies, which is what I had pictured happening in my head the whole time. I have no idea who they were or what they wanted. Maybe it was someone just messing with us, or maybe it was a clan of deformed hillbillies who were hunting us. I will never know because I will not be returning to find out. This is a true story. Every time I tell it, it pulls the eyes of everyone in the room. I'm not sure why I haven't posted it before, but upon reflecting with a friend, I decided it was time to share it. In the summer of 2020, my friends Alex and Violet and I decided to go on a mountain vacation. COVID cabin fever had hit us hard, and we were desperate to get out. We settled on a mountain estate and planned to camp and hike at several different locations. For one night, we thought it would be fun to book a cabin in the woods. Violet's parents had rented a fire tower once and loved it, but a cabin beside a fire tower was all we could find. It was cheap, clean, and secluded. Excited to have a night where we could be as obnoxious as we wanted, we booked it. In the weeks leading up to the trip, we decided it would be a great idea to drop acid at the cabin. Violet bought an entire sheet in preparation for our arrival, and it was tucked in her bag as we pulled out of the driveway to make our way to the cabin. I remember this knot in the pit of my stomach, this aching feeling that gnawed at me. I told Alex and Violet that there was no way we could drop acid that night. Violet was pissed. We turned around and got into a massive argument, but I stood my ground. I just knew that we had no business tripping that night. Finally, the fireworks settled and we were off. The cabin was roughly 30 minutes away from the nearest town. It sat atop a mountain. We held our breath as we rounded the busted road that spiraled toward the top. There were no pull-offs, no other campsites, just a long winding road that led us to the cabin at the peak. We settled in and started a fire to keep warm. As dusk gave way to night, we heard the unmistakable noise of an engine on the road, then the flash of headlights. A side-by-side with 3 kids arrived, and our nerves settled. They smiled, gave us a wave, climbed the fire tower, and left. We heard that there may be occasional visitors to the fire tower, but they were the only ones who'd come by. We doused the fire and moved inside, heated some hot dogs until they were lukewarm, ate them fast, and sat in silence. You truly don't know how quiet it is until you're in the middle of nowhere. You can hear every rustle of the leaves, the whisper of the wind through their branches. You get so used to white noise. Living in the city, there's always the hum of an air conditioner or the dim roar of traffic to focus on. Here, the closest thing to white noise was the sound of our own breathing. We literally jumped at every noise, too frightened to speak to one another. And finally, I had enough. I cracked a few wine coolers and passed them to Alex and Violet, and slapped a board game down on the table between our bunk beds. It didn't take us long for us to loosen, and we were laughing, having the grand old time that we'd envisioned. Much soberer than we'd thought, but enough that we were able to ignore the rumble of the woods. Later on, we'd all recall hearing noises in the background, the snap of twigs, the dim rumble of an engine. None of us wanted to rupture the air of nonchalance between us, so we ignored it. Until a human hand reached up to the window between us and slapped it 3 times. We were screaming in an instant. Alex called 911, put them on speakerphone, and handed his cell to me. He grabbed the pokers from the fireplace and passed them out. Violet started calling family members and saying her last goodbyes. I held my breath and listened for any more noise. Whoever this was, whatever this was, would have heard us call 911, and now they were being careful to make a silent retreat. Dispatch arrived 20 minutes later. A lucky thing for a 1 a.m. emergency call, and they had their dogs comb the mountain. Nothing. They suggested that it may have been a bear, but I could tell from their faces that they didn't believe that for a second. We had barely cooked those hot dogs, and why would a bear smack the window by a couple of screaming kids rather than the one closest to the pan that we used to cook? Why would a bear knock on the window like a human? Why, when we screamed, did the bear make a stealthy retreat? They had no answers, but they had one anecdote. As they sped to us, they'd come across a car at the base of the mountain, but that was the only sign of life they'd seen. I remember that my blood ran cold, but Violet and Alex were too frazzled to absorb the weight of what they'd said, and they were dizzied by a new horror. Violet's car, thoroughly dusted by our drive up to the mountain, was covered in handprints. Handprints that didn't match our own, that touched places we hadn't. We grabbed our crab by the armful and threw it inside, eager to remove every part of ourselves from this mountain. We followed the police, grateful every pothole found us further and further from that wretched cabin. We made it down in record time, and we found lodging at a seedy hotel that reeked of cat piss. I couldn't sleep. The thought of that car on the road rang in my head. Remember, there was nothing else on that mountain. It was a narrow road to the top. No pull-offs, no other campsites. There was the fire tower. Maybe a visitor decided to spook us during their late-night excursion, but the kids from earlier, we'd seen their headlights. Whoever did this had stopped their vehicle further down the road and hiked the rest of the way. They didn't want to be spotted. They wanted silence, secrecy. Whoever this was hadn't been looking for a cheap scare. They'd planned this. I don't think I'll ever know what the person on the mountain wanted from me. I don't know if it was a practical joke or the beginning of a night of terror. I'm grateful for Alex's quick wit in calling 911. I wonder if our visitor knew we had service. It had certainly been a welcome surprise to us. Perhaps that was a wrench in his plan, enough to spook him before he could make things ugly. In truth, I don't know if I want to know. I have a tale from a long time ago I thought I would share. I hope I don't bore any of you. I am now a 72-year-old man. This happened long ago, but I remember it so well. The background was a series of events that placed me in a mountain cabin outside of Frederick, Maryland circa 1969 or 1970. Just say my life at the time was in disarray. I had dropped out of college, my father had died very badly, and I was alienated. I needed to get my mind right. The opportunity to move to an isolated cabin to live in contemplation and solitude was welcome. I had some inheritance money to pay for it. To the best of my memory, I was there for 8 to 9 months. No TV, but books and radio. I had a library card, and I can't remember if I had a phone. The story begins when a month into my stay, a female beagle showed up at my door. She was a lost dog and I took her in. Never could train her to do anything, but I fed her and she was sweet, if not the brightest dog I ever had. A few months in, I began to feel a presence around the isolated cabin. Hard to describe, but I felt like someone was watching. On many occasions, I thought someone might even be looking in my cabin window watching us. The next phase was the shadowing or following. I knew the folks half a mile down the lane, woods all around, and would sometimes visit them at night. Something was waiting for me, and followed closely in the woods beside me in the darkness. You could hear it easily, footsteps in the woods, and it picked up its pace as I did. This not only happened to me, but to my younger brother who visited, and to friends, and it spooked them out big time. At night, it was out there, around the cabin. Here's the funny thing. I was never afraid and never felt threatened. Not at all, at least early on. There was no feeling of malevolence. I spent a good bit of time wandering the vast areas of woodlands around me. There was a state park just up the hill, and the Frederick Municipal Forest went on for mile after mile. The whole of western Maryland was so much more country than it is now. None of the development had set in yet. In our hikes, the dog and I, we came across evidence of campsites, recent ones in the woods. Traces of fires, old abandoned buildings that had corners that gave shelter and looked like they were slept in. Garbage, food and drink, paper, what have you. Perhaps it was hunters, but much of it didn't have the organized feel you would get from experienced hunters. The last month of my stay there was when things intensified. Maybe he sensed I was preparing to leave. In the mornings, I would find small dead animals at the bottom of the front porch steps. The cabin had a small front porch, screened with a light door and 4 wooden steps to the ground. A spotlight would illuminate the long front yard, with woods close by on either side. Dead animals began to appear at the bottom of the steps many mornings. I remember small birds, then a squirrel, a rabbit, even a weasel one day, like they were offerings. I had to grab them up before the dog ate them. This went on almost daily for several weeks. One night, very late, I was awoken by some sound. I lay in bed and heard something from the porch. I hopped up and hit the lights, and I saw that hound dog who had never learned to sit or stay standing at the front door in a perfect point position. She was shaking in fear. She never barked. I heard the door slam and footsteps down the steps. I hit the spotlight but saw nothing. I went out. He had been on the porch at my front door, maybe trying to enter. After that, I stayed in at night more and more. The animal offerings got bigger and bigger. Larger birds, a possum, a woodchuck. It was not funny. The final 2 gifts were legs from either horses or cows. Big and bloody. One was skinned. Holy crap. The second to the last day, the dog left me. I could hear her in the woods howling on a trail following a scent. I looked for her in every way I could, came up in the following weeks, but to no avail. She left just as she came. I moved back to the Maryland suburbs of DC, got an apartment with a friend, got a job, and moved on with my life. One day, not long after, I picked up the Washington Post, and there was an article about recent encounters with the Sykesville Monster. It described a tall, Yeti-like creature fur-covered on 2 legs that would pick out a family or person and give them attention. I wasn't the only one. The attention described in the article was exactly what happened to me. Following you at night, looking inside the house, gifts, and so on. I was shocked. If I had turned on that spotlight and seen a Bigfoot or Yeti, I might still be running. But I think I know who it was. Sykesville, Maryland was the location of the Springfield Hospital Center, a large state psychiatric hospital. It was 20 miles or so east of Frederick. Back then, many folks knew how to live in the woods. They grew up that way. Country folk. I think the monster in question was an escaped patient or just a free schizophrenic who lived outside. This is just like all the homeless you now see in cities. Probably off his meds, but somehow functional and lonely. He would pick people or families to adopt. The camps in the woods could have been him. Nothing to do, he would make mischief. I think he liked me, but sensed I was leaving. I can't prove any of this, of course. It's just my theory. My monster was very much of that time and place, and his behavior was what I noticed in nearly every case then. I do not think he could have survived until the 1980s. Deinstitutionalization of mental hospitals threw the mentally ill out into the streets and took away the shelter of hospitals. Unprotected, the mentally ill die. I used to deliver packages in the mail for a company in the South. A lot of the daily routes were in the hills and woods. Last year I had a route that was super deep in the country. I was pretty used to the back roads in the country now at this job by this point. There's some houses I stopped at where the driveway is super steep or some other crap. But for the most part, everyone was always super friendly out there. Good old country folk. Well, I had a delivery that was down this long gravel street. There were only a few houses on my journey to the house that my delivery was at. Still, at this point, I'm totally fine. There's a ton of these types of roads out there. Well, I arrived at my destination. No mailbox, no driveway, no gravel. You could make out a little bit of a path that's been made from cars driving to the house, but I'm serious when I say a little bit. The driveway is maybe 250 yards long with the house at the end of it. I'm only sketched out because I'm in the woods and the land is super unpredictable back there, meaning you never know when there's just a drop off. I'm in a huge box truck, so if one tire was to slip off the side, the whole thing is going down. So I'm driving literally probably less than a mile an hour, taking my time, being extremely cautious. As I'm making this drive back to the house, I start kind of checking out my surroundings. I pass a really old broken down truck that the ground is starting to grow around. Again, super common back there, no biggie. As I get further and further down the driveway, I notice that I've probably passed about 4 satellite dishes, like cable dishes. I start approaching the house. The house from the outside looks like it's a Walter White Season 5 style cabin. It's a shack. I park and just kind of check out my surroundings. After about a minute, I was just like, okay, I'm just gonna go deliver it and leave. I walked up to the front door of this cabin thing, and the front door had a large glass window in it. Not modern, think old, like a cabin that was built in the late 50s with no repairs. As I set the small package down in the front door, I glanced inside the house. The main room, which would be like a living room I'm guessing, is completely empty. The only thing that is in this room is 2 foldable metal chairs, both unfolded, both facing a corner of the room, but nothing is in the corner. In the meantime, I'm trying to do my job with my right hand, where I keep making very quick glances inside. From what I saw, there was nothing in that house. Nothing. It was a shell. The kitchen may have had old appliances in it, but I wasn't really paying attention to that part. My sixth sense kicked in, and my brain obviously said, "This isn't right." So I turn around and start walking back to my truck. Maybe 30 feet away, I take my hood off my head and take my hat off so I can have a full peripheral view around me. I immediately start looking to see where the closest neighbor's house is. I saw a building up the hill just a tiny bit, but it honestly looked like it was on this guy's property. I'm sure this was my head playing major tricks on me, but as I'm walking back to my truck, I just feel a presence. I feel like it's hanging onto my back and getting heavier and heavier with every single step closer to the van that I took. I jumped in my van, I locked the doors and checked the back to make sure no one was in there. Screw the driveway. I back out of this entire driveway while checking my surroundings everywhere. I make it back onto the road. As I'm driving down the road, maybe 40 feet away from this dude's entrance of the driveway, there's a trash bag in the middle of the street. It's open just a little bit. I slow down and it looks like there's a woman's sweater or something in there. Was that a kill room? Was someone or maybe even multiple people held hostage on that property? Something was definitely up. I immediately contacted my buddy and told him about it. He suggested I go back and snap a few pictures, and I agreed. About 5 minutes go by, and I make it back to the address, and the trash bag is completely gone at this point. I looked everywhere on the street and the side of the street. It's completely gone. But get this. I always thought about how I never know what I'm delivering or who I'm delivering to. When I first landed this job, I remember thinking how crazy it would be if someone was holding people hostage in their house, torturing them and ordering their food and house supplies online because they were afraid of leaving the house with the kidnapped people all alone. That's all I could think about when dropping off this package. I left that job not even a week later for different reasons, but I did tell my boss, and he assured me that he would contact the local police department and take that house off of our normal route schedule. I never heard anything back about it. I'm very aware that if the police went out there and found something or people, I would immediately be called in to tell them what I saw, so I'm going to assume that they went out to check it out and found nothing. But in the same sense, it makes me wonder about the trash bag immediately disappearing after I left. Did they realize that they messed up and I was going to say something, so they prepared for that? I don't know. I also have no clue what the address was or how to get there by memory to check it out myself, but I think about that very often, and every single time I do, I get chills down my spine just because of the thought of the unknown. This is an encounter my grandmother had back in early 2001. My grandma and grandpa had just moved into a very isolated cabin in the North Georgia mountains to escape the fast-paced city life after they retired. The house was perched on the side of the mountain on about 5 acres of their property, with a very long gravel driveway from the so-called main road which connected the surrounding cabins. The closest house was about 1 to 2 miles away as the crow flies, and 3 to 4 miles by road. So yeah, definitely a low-key spot that's very hard to find. Soon after they purchased the property, they began the moving process, and both grandparents ended up making separate runs from their old house to the new house. One night, my grandmother was alone at the new house in the mountains, while my grandpa was back at the old house taking care of some final business and last-minute packing. He decided to stay there for the night and avoid the 2-hour drive back to the new house, in turn leaving my grandma alone in the middle of nowhere. She was fine with it and decided to go ahead and sleep to prepare for moving the next day. At around 1 a.m., the house was dead silent, and all of a sudden there was a very loud knock at the front door. Now keep in mind you could easily hear someone if they drove up the driveway, but she never heard a car. The front door was all glass, so it basically sounded like someone was banging on a window. She was terrified to say the least, and she decided to stay in bed and wait it out. The knocks came again, this time even louder. At this point, her adrenaline and fears through the roof, not knowing who could possibly be at the door this late in the middle of the night. Once again, she stays in bed and waits it out. About 5 minutes pass, and there are no more knocks. She waits even longer to maybe hear a car drive away or something, but no car ever drove off. The only way someone could have been there is if they walked several miles through the woods to get there, or walked up the very long driveway. Nothing else ever happened that night, and nothing ever came of it. It's still a pretty strange and creepy occurrence for such an isolated place. So me, my boyfriend, his best friend, and his girlfriend drove up to Big Bear June 26th. Then a day later, another friend of ours drove up June 27th, and he was supposed to sleep downstairs, and couples sleep upstairs since there's only 2 bedrooms. The first night we stayed there, it was kinda creepy because the cabin was pretty remote, and of course there's absolutely no lights outside. It is in the woods with coyotes howling and bears, but nonetheless completely normal activity. On the 27th around 12 a.m., my boyfriend and I are in bed, when suddenly our friend sleeping downstairs comes banging on the door, freaking out, saying he saw shadows in the woods, and also that the motion light came on and there was thumping outside. We got a little freaked out, but my boyfriend got out of bed and checked the entire cabin and even went outside. Nothing. We go up to the other couple's room where there's a porch with a sliding glass door that looks out into the woods. It's important to note that I'm naturally a very anxious and scared person, while my boyfriend is a rock. He's calm and logical while I tend to jump to the worst case scenario. My boyfriend goes over to check the last place in the cabin, so he pulls the curtain and then he jumps and yells, "Oh my God!" At this point, I'm terrified. My boyfriend is a 180-pound CrossFit coach, and to see a big guy like that scared is nauseating. He locked the door and backed away slowly. He then quietly says, "There's a large man standing outside staring at us. He's just standing in the woods looking at us." At this point, I'm thinking he's messing with me. He looks at me and says, "Go lock the door." That's when I knew he was serious. Everyone is freaking out at this point. I run and lock the door behind us, and we all decide to stay in the room to keep an eye out. It's the middle of summer, and it's really hot, but we refuse to open a window. I'm so scared, but trying not to show it as everyone else seemed to have calmed down now. About 30 minutes go by, and nothing happens. I get annoyed with the heat, and the fact that there's 5 people in a tiny room, and 3 of them are men, so my boyfriend and I go back to our room. I'm still pretty spooked, so my boyfriend tries to cheer me up. At this point, it's about 1:30 a.m. I told him that I was too scared to sleep with the lights off. He tells me that's totally fine and he understands, so we just lay with the lights completely on. Finally, I start drifting off to sleep when I heard a thud. I sit up and look at my boyfriend. He looks at me. Then the power cuts off. I immediately start sobbing. I'm trembling and I can't see anything because it's pitch black. I try to get out of bed and run, but my legs get tangled in the sheets and I fall. My boyfriend picks me up and we grab our phone and then run to the other room where everyone else was staying at. I'm hysterical at this point. I try to contact our host, but nothing will go through. I try to call my dad, but all of our phones say no service. We're alone out there. Thank God the friend who drove up after us had a different carrier, because his phone actually had 1 bar, so he called the local sheriff. I realize now it's a bit of an overreaction, but at the time we thought we were gonna die. He's on the phone with the sheriff, and they transfer us to the utilities company. We give the address, and they actually tell us that we're too far in the woods and they don't cover that area. At this point, we're wondering if the entire area has no power, or if the man outside just cut our power. I cry more and we call 911 to report suspicious activity and a power outage. They send the fire department. A few hours go by, it's 3 a.m., and suddenly the power comes back on. We ended up falling asleep, and the next day we had talked to some locals of the area. We told them our power went out, and he said that was strange and shouldn't have happened. He told us the only reason that happens out there is because of a snowstorm. He said he couldn't explain it. I have no idea what the hell happened, but I don't think I'm ever gonna go back. I just remember this encounter I had when I was about 9, and I thought I would share it here. My parents usually take me and my siblings on numerous outdoor camping sites, and I had great memories, except for one particular outing. It was at the Poconos in Pennsylvania where there were a lot of sites we went to. However, on this trip we had rented out cabins instead of pitching tents. I was okay with it. When we were all settled in our cabin, my parents and siblings were inside chatting, planning the weekend and eating. But me being a sporty kid, I took my baseball bat and some baseballs and then went outside. In front of our cabin was a huge circle of just open grass. I threw some baseballs in the air and proceeded to hit them. About 10 minutes in, a dark green car rolls up a few feet behind me to where I was standing. Mind you, there are other cabins in the area, so I thought it was just a family lost and wanted to ask where their cabin was. But when the window rolls down, it was just some middle-aged guy, and I remember the inside of his car was really dirty. He said, "Hey kid, you're not allowed to play baseball here." At this point, I knew this dude was shady because he didn't drive the white pickup trucks with the campsite logo on it, so he wasn't security. Plus, he had an ultra creepy smile. I just said, "Oh, sorry, I didn't know." But he got really creepy when he then said,
"Yeah, there's a baseball field on top of that hill. I can take you there if you want. It'll be fun."
And then he pointed at the hill, and then he gave me a creepy smile, and he beckoned me to get in the car. Now things got real. I gripped my aluminum bat tighter, and I made a sort of scowling kind of face. He saw this, and I swear he was about to open the car. That is, until he heard and saw my dad laughing and coming out of the cabin talking to someone on his phone. The creepy part was that he didn't get angry. The dude just looked at me and gave me a smile with a face that said, "I'll get you next time." I sprinted to my cabin, and from then on clung to my parents, and I kept my baby brother and adolescent sister close to me at all times for the entire weekend. I never told any of them about the guy. Oh, and I checked the campsite map on our drive home. There was actually no baseball field on top of that hill that this creep was talking about. Instead, there was a picnic table, and next to it, dense woods and a creek. My family and I went on a trip to the Hocking Hills area of southern Ohio a few weeks ago. There was a place that I always wanted to visit, the abandoned ghost town of Moonville Rail Tunnel. I have never been to this area, so I didn't know what to expect, but I did know that it was pretty deep in the woods. We took a trip from our rented cabin using Google for GPS to the location. We started driving and it's, for lack of better words, real impoverished where we're driving. Hills Have Eyes-esque. We literally only see a few cars on the way there and are on back roads. We get to a point where we need to enter into a forest and we're close to the tunnel. There was a sign that said we were entering Bubba Wood. For a little additional information, I drive a Mercedes that I'm just lucky to have, and I have my husband in the car, a black man with dreadlocks, my 10-year-old nonverbal autistic son, and my 6-year-old daughter. We drove down this really creepy stone road into the forest, and there's nothing back there. No houses, no cars, nobody. We see signs that we're close and pull into the parking lot. There's a footbridge up ahead. We walk over the footbridge and make our way toward the tunnel, which is a lot larger than I expected. We hear this sound coming from the other side of the tunnel that goes into the woods away from the parking lot. A truck comes driving through the tunnel towards us while we're on foot. He gets out of his truck with a chainsaw, and it's a white guy in his 60s. He walks with my entire family everywhere we go through the tunnel. I tried to make small talk with him and pull some info about if he worked for the Department of Natural Resources, etc. He really wasn't budging. We turn around to walk out of the tunnel, and he starts using a chainsaw behind us, and the sound is just really echoing through this tunnel. At this point, we have no cell phone service, and literally no one knows my family is out there except us. I was already worried my car was sending the wrong idea to people like we have money or something. We don't, FYI. We rush to the car to get the kids in their booster seats, and this weirdo comes driving over the footbridge in his truck towards us in the parking lot. I honestly don't even know how his truck fits on it. He stops again and gets out of his truck and starts walking the other direction, much to our relief. About this time, I noticed that there were dusty handprints on my car. I asked my husband if they were his, and he compared his hand and my son's, and they were not a match. I don't know who could have touched the car because we were with the chainsaw man the entire time we were there. We got out of there as fast as possible. Just a few minutes later, I looked in my rearview mirror, and there's a bunch of dust kicked up behind us, and there he is. He had to have driven pretty fast on the stone road to catch up to us like that. There's nowhere to go in these woods. The road is basically one lane and we have no cell service or GPS. Every time I think we lose him, he's there again. I'm waiting for my tires to get popped or something, or for this guy to ram me off the road into a ravine in the woods. Finally, we get out of these woods, and I turn out and he's still following us. We were following printed directions to get back, and I ended up making a wrong turn in the excitement. The guy on the truck was finally gone, and I turned around to go past the stone road that goes into the forest. There is one lone house near this road, and there's his truck parked there. He had to have seen us drive into this road into the woods and taken some back way to the tunnel. I don't know if he was trying to protect the site from more graffiti or what, but he really creeped us out. It was like every scary movie trope rolled into one single event.